Chapter 11:05. What did you just say? The shattering of the sky grew even more apparent. Cracks rapidly formed and closed up, leaving behind what looked like scars. There didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary about Meng Hao, and yet he had suddenly become a larger-than-life figure, like a giant who stood on equal footing with the heavens. A terrifying aura rose up from him as he took his sixth step and unleashed the sixth punch. It was the bedevilment fist yet again, the strike of self-immolation. However, this strike was delivered even more directly than before, and the domineering power of Meng Hao's energy seemed to fuse with heaven and earth. When the strike landed, Lin Kang let out a miserable scream. He bit his tongue and spit out a mouthful of blood, which transformed into majestic yellow springs that swept out in all directions. Massive booms could be heard as the yellow springs were destroyed. Meng Hao was slightly injured, and yet the killing intent in his eyes had not lessened. "Last step," he said, taking the seventh step in unison with the destruction of the yellow springs. It was as if the entire world ground to a halt and was replaced by Meng Hao. With the assistance of 20% of the chi flow of the windswept realm, Meng Hao could fuse with the lands, as if he were the embodiment of the will of heaven. The entire world began to burst. Meng Hao was like a divine spirit that represented the will of heaven, becoming its embodiment as he fused with heaven and earth. His foot landed, and it was as if the heavens were crushing the lands beneath. His fist was like heaven and earth, destroying all living things. It was as if Meng Hao were the most respected entity in all creation. That was because this was the God-slaying fist. When the God-slaying fist was unleashed, the echelon cultivators in the other nations watching the battle let out successive gasps. They had watched Meng Hao's terrifying momentum grow with each step, had seen the wild and devilish energy building up, had witnessed his intensely domineering style. It instantly left a deep impression on everyone and caused them to tremble in astonishment. The echelon cultivator from the first mountain, the white-robed youth, felt his eyes going wide as an expression of shock filled his face. Meng Hao's way of fighting left even him astonished. Meng Hao seized the initiative and pressed forward, crushing everything in front of him like dead weeds. All of the echelon cultivators were completely astonished by this fist strike. What fist strike is that? It might not be impossible for him to actually kill Lin Kang with only 7 steps. This Meng Hao is actually incredibly strong. Han Qinglei couldn't match up to him, and it looks like Lin Kang is also going to be defeated. He might be qualified to fight for the spot of the #1 most powerful cultivator in the echelon. At this point, Lin Kang performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then shoved his hands out in front of him. "Holy Requiem Skull," he roared. Shockingly, a paragon magic appeared, an enormous golden skull. The surface of the skull was covered with innumerable magical symbols, tightly packed in a way that seemed to encompass a will of death that mourned for all living things. The Holy Requiem Skull was Lin Kang's paragon magic. By gaining enlightenment of this skull, he was able to craft a paragon magic, and thus enter Paragon C Dream's echelon. Becoming part of the echelon completely changed his destiny, allowing him to rise to prominence in the fourth mountain. With the secret support of Xianxia, he had survived numerous deadly trials and had defended his place in the echelon. All of those numerous battles gave him complete and utter control over his paragon magic, a power which enabled him to peer ahead into the future of the battle. He was able to find the weaknesses in all other Taoist magics. He was also able to predict what actions his opponents would take. He would then use all of that information to his advantage. Even more shocking to his opponents was that he could see visions of their future. Because of that, and thanks to the tips and pointers given him by Xianxia, the path of immortality that he treaded was essentially the same as that of Xianxia. It was a unique path of immortality that was like striding out from death into a new life. However, his paragon magic required a significant expenditure of mental energy, and therefore, he rarely used it. However, having been forced into a corner by Meng Hao's domineering style, he was left with no choice but to utilize this most powerful paragon magic. However, as soon as he unleashed his Holy Requiem Skull paragon magic, Lin Kang's face completely fell. The only thing he saw in his vision was that there was no way for him to escape from the power of Meng Hao's fist strike. There were no gaps. There was no way to escape. He was even able to determine that after Meng Hao's strike landed, he didn't plan to follow up with any divine abilities or magical techniques. It was as if Meng Hao was completely and utterly confident that this fist and this step would utterly eradicate Lin Kang. How could this be? He thought, shaking mentally. He tried to back up, but Meng Hao's killing intent exploded out, as if the god-slaying fist were capable of eradicating all living things in heaven and earth. It would land on Lin Kong, and there was nothing he could do about it. Tears of blood seeped out of Lin Kong's eyes. After madly depleting his mental energy to use his paragon magic at this critical juncture, he was able to glimpse a bit of the future. The only result of that flashing vision was that Lin Kong's face fell. He had no time to think. Eyes bloodshot, he viciously sent the gold-colored Holy Requiem skull rumbling forward to try to block Meng Hao's incoming fist strike. Meng Hao hadn't lost even a bit of momentum. He was backed by the will of heaven and earth, so no matter what tried to block his path, it would be brushed aside with ease. There was nothing that could stand in the way of his surging energy. That was because Meng Hao's god-slaying fist was backed by the chi flow of the windswept realm, utilizing the will of heaven to take it to the absolute peak. Anything and everything would be reduced to rubble in the face of this fist. Are you mmmmblllly? Meng Hao's god-slaying fist slammed into the golden skull, causing massive rumbling to echo out. The skull trembled and then exploded into pieces, allowing Meng Hao's fist to slam into Lin Kong's chest. Cracking sounds could be heard, and Lin Kong let out a blood-curdling scream. His body hurled backward like a kite with its string cut. All the bones in his body shattered, and in the blink of an eye he exploded. His chest erupted in a fountain of blood, which spread out in all directions until his entire body was destroyed, with the exception of his head. By now, all spectators in the windswept realm were completely and utterly shocked, filled with pounding waves of astonishment. To witness something happening that moments ago had seemed impossible led to unparalleled stupefaction. In the First Nation, the echelon cultivator from the First Mountain, the white-robed young man, had been sitting there cross-legged moments ago. Now he was standing, staring at the screen along with all of his followers, whose faces were covered with complete disbelief. They all knew Lin Kong, and because of that, the scene which was playing out in front of them was completely astounding. He actually did it, the followers gasped. The echelon cultivator from the First Mountain looked at the screen and then suddenly smiled, although it was a smile of complete coldness. His eyes flickered with a bright light as he said, "This guy does qualify to fight me." In the Second Nation, on the National Aura Mountain, everything was freezing cold. Countless snowflakes swirled around a man who sat there on the mountain peak. He wore a blue robe, and he was the echelon cultivator from the Second Mountain. His features were cold, but his eyes narrowed as he watched the ice screen in front of him and the image of Meng Hao upon it. He seemed calm on the outside, but inwardly he was rocked by waves of shock. In the Third Nation, a strange scene was playing out. 100 cultivators sat cross-legged on the National Aura Mountain. At their head was a middle-aged man wearing an imperial robe. His face was extremely dark and sinister. Is this Meng Hao a variable thrown in by the windswept imperial lord? The pudgy echelon cultivator in the Fifth Nation, the young boy in the Sixth Nation, and the murderous youth in the Seventh Nation all watched with flickering faces and trembling hearts. Earlier, they didn't think that Meng Hao could kill Lin Kong with a handful of steps, but now they had personally witnessed the battle and seen Meng Hao's power and domineering style. It instantly turned into a massive pressure weighing down on them. Now, not a one of them dared to underestimate Meng Hao. Although they coveted his 2 world seals, as of now, they were forced to weigh the risks associated with trying to take them. You could say that Meng Hao's battle just now had completely cowed the echelon cultivators in the windswept realm. At the same time that all the echelon cultivators were shaken by Meng Hao, Lin Kong's body exploded in the air above the Eighth Nation. Just when his head seemed on the verge of exploding, killing him in body and spirit, golden light suddenly began to shine up from the shattered golden skull. It transformed into a golden vortex which surrounded Lin Kong's head, as if to teleport him away. There was still a bit of life force left in Lin Kong's head, thanks to his special way of practicing cultivation. As long as he still had his head, he could recover, although it came with a heavy price, including a drop in cultivation base. In the moment that he was about to teleport away, Meng Hao's energy suddenly rose up even higher than before, and he said, "Think you can just leave? Exterminate." The words were spoken softly, but in that moment an enormous, shocking foot appeared. The foot seemed to obfuscate the entire sky, and when it appeared, it began to crush down onto Lin Kong, shattering natural law, destroying essence. This was the ultimate power of the 7 God steps. The previous 7 steps were just a buildup of momentum and energy, leading up to this explosive, exterminating attack. An intense sensation of deadly crisis filled Lin Kong. He had experienced such feelings before in his life, but this was the most intense it had ever been. Even his battle with the echelon cultivator from the first mountain hadn't been so terrifying and shocking. There was no possible way he could have ever imagined that Meng Hao would be so powerful. When he saw the foot descending, he realized he didn't have time to complete the teleportation. He knew that he was about to die, so he let out a powerful howl that echoed out in all directions. Meng Hao, if I die, Su Qing dies too. Those words entered Meng Hao's ears like the crash of zillions of thunderclaps. His entire body began to shake. 1. Lin Kong talked to Su Qing in chapter 1058. What did you just say? His heart began to pound in a way it rarely did, even causing his divine ability to become unstable. The enormous foot in the sky trembled, and because of his mental instability, his momentum faltered, and his energy began to wane. Upon leaving planet South Heaven, he had asked his father about Su Qing. Fang Ziyufeng had told him that he left some divine will on Su Qing to protect her during reincarnation. Finding out her final destination when she was actually reincarnated was a matter of fortune and timing, but Fang Ziyufeng had assured him that he didn't need to worry. Even still, and even after so many years had passed, Meng Hao still worried about it occasionally. His original plan had been to wait until he left the Nine Seas God world, and then go back to planet South Heaven to find out more about the situation. After all, she was his wife, his beloved partner. Although he didn't often think about the matter, to hear Lin Kong say what he just did filled Meng Hao's mind with crashing waves of shock. Chapter 1106, Slaughtering into the Fourth Nation. In the moment that the instability of Meng Hao's divine ability caused the enormous foot to grind to a momentary halt, Lin Kong's head finally got its opportunity to flee. The golden vortex covered his head, then began to spin rapidly. Finally, Lin Kong's head vanished. The vortex then transformed into countless motes of golden dust, which then vanished as well. Meng Hao's face darkened as he looked at the spot where Lin Kong had vanished. His mind was still being battered by waves of astonishment. Su Qing's place in his heart was something that he didn't allow anyone to touch. It was his weak spot. Su Qing was his wife, to whom he had sworn his vows in front of heaven and earth. He had watched her beauty fade as he held her in his arms, looked on as her soul entered the underworld river. They had agreed to meet again after she was reincarnated. Meng Hao could never have predicted that he would hear Su Qing's name come out of Lin Kong's mouth in this place. It was something that caused his eyes to glow with infinite coldness. This was his first time encountering Lin Kong, and he knew that it was also the first time Lin Kong had ever seen him. Therefore, for him to say Su Qing's name indicated that Lin Kong had seen her in her reincarnated form. Then he thought about where Lin Kong came from, and a tremor ran through him. That means there's an 80% likelihood that Su Qing is on the fourth mountain. But how could Lin Kong possibly know about the relationship between me and Su Qing? Then he thought about Lin Kong's paragon magic and the familiar aura he had sensed, and he understood everything. What Lin Kong had seen was not something that he could use to defend against the god-slaying fist. Instead, he saw the connection between Meng Hao and Su Qing. A moment later, Meng Hao's eyes began to flicker with killing intent as he recalled Lin Kong's words. If I die, Su Qing dies too. Lin Kong, you're courting death, he said, looking up. Then he took a step forward. He did not return to the ninth nation, but instead didn't hesitate for a moment as he headed toward the fourth nation. As of this moment, world seals weren't important and Mount Whiteseal wasn't important. The only important thing were clues about Su Qing and what Lin Kong had just said. Without clarifying these matters, how could he possibly return to the ninth nation? Even if he did, his heart would be in chaos, and he wouldn't be able to remain calm. Rumbling filled the air as Meng Hao slashed through the air in a beam of light, flying like a bolt of lightning. Dust kicked up as he sped faster and faster, his killing intent rising. Soon he was nearing the border of the eighth nation. He would not enter the seventh nation, but rather head through the region of the central temple. After all, that was the fastest way to reach the fourth nation. He had no way to know whether or not Lin Kong took this route, but there was no time to pause and consider the matter. He sped along, soon leaving the eighth nation and entering the region of the central temple. When he looked down, he saw the fierce, bloody fighting and the countless soldiers engaged in battle. The entire land was stained red with blood. He merely glanced at it as he sped by, piercing through the air with shocking momentum. The other cultivators from the mountain and sea realm saw him and were instantly shocked. That's Meng Hao. That's the echelon cultivator from the Ninth Nation, Meng Hao. Why is he here? Although none of these people had witnessed his battle with Lin Kang like the echelon cultivators had, they knew that he had broken 2 of the previous 3 records. It was something that filled most of them with incredible awe and fear. There were some fools among them whose greed and avarice was awakened as soon as they laid eyes on Meng Hao. From what they understood, if you could kill someone in the echelon, then you could get their echelon mark. Not too long after Meng Hao entered the central temple region, a stream of sword light suddenly sped through the air toward him. The sword chi was shocking, filled with a murderous air, and was apparently imbued with natural law as it stabbed toward Meng Hao's neck. You just showed up, why are you running away? Someone said coldly. The attack was made by a middle-aged cultivator, but he wasn't the only aggressor. 2 other cultivators shot toward Meng Hao from off to the side. In other circumstances, Meng Hao might be filled with a desire to hunt them down and kill them, or might just ignore them. But in his anxiety-filled state, there was only one fate in store for anyone who got in his way. Instant death. His eyes were bright red as he extended his hand, grabbing the incoming flying sword, then sending it speeding back in the direction it had come from. The speed with which it moved now vastly exceeded its previous speed. Intense, incomparable energy propelled the sword forward. The sword itself could not withstand the force propelling it, and began to collapse, starting from the tip. Before it could even collapse by half, though, it stabbed so hard into the forehead of the cultivator who had thrown it that even the hilt blasted through him. The speed was so indescribable that, despite the extraordinary cultivation base of the middle-aged cultivator, he didn't even qualify to try to dodge it. He was dead instantly. This scene caused the other 2 cultivators to gasp and fall back. Other restless cultivators off in the distance looked on with shock and didn't dare to attempt to get in Meng Hao's way. Since no one dared to block him, Meng Hao shot through the central temple region, quickly reaching the area where it bordered the 4th Nation. Many of the cultivators behind him looked on with shocked faces. He actually went through the entire central temple region. How is that possible? The pressure there is incredible. Misfortune will befall anyone who enters there. Not even other echelon cultivators would dare to go in there, and yet, he did. Could it be, because of the 20% of the chi flow of the windswept realm? Everyone was shocked as Meng Hao sped off. Meanwhile, Lin Kang's head appeared on the national aura mountain of the 4th Nation. The head promptly withered, causing Lin Kang to let out a howl. Blue veins popped out, and then veins and arteries began to snake down out of his neck. They grew longer and longer, quickly forming the outline of a body. His face was now pale white, but he bit his tongue again and then roared. Next, bones began to form inside of that body. A recovery like this was one of indescribable pain, and an incredible price had to be paid, one that he could barely manage. Furthermore, he would experience a cultivation base loss that would be impossible to recover from easily. However, all of that was better than dying. Meng Hao, I'm not going to let you get away with this, he growled, his expression vicious. As his body reformed, he threw his head back and howled. Venomous rage appeared in his eyes. Just as Meng Hao had suspected, his holy requiem skull had given him a glimpse, not of a way to survive the fist strike, but rather another vision. He had seen the 4th mountain, and Meng Hao, surrounded by a sea of blood and mountains of corpses. It was as if Meng Hao had traveled there amidst endless slaughter. In the vision he saw Su Qing. She and Meng Hao were looking at each other, their gazes soft. The vision not only caused him to feel jealous, it gave him the opportunity he needed. Faster must go faster. I don't know exactly what type of relationship Su Qing and Meng Hao have, but seeing how nervous he got, she's obviously his weak spot. As soon as I said her name, he just about went crazy. He's definitely on his way here to kill me. I have to recover so that I can flee. He gritted his teeth hard as his body restored itself. Time passed. More than an hour went by, during which time he continued to pay a heavy price for the recovery process. When his body finally reappeared, he coughed up a massive mouthful of blood. This body was incredibly weak. He now possessed only about 60% of his original cultivation base. This was actually the weakest he had ever been since joining the echelon. His face was ashen as he reached up and grabbed the world seal from the statue. He then flew off of the national aura mountain, eyes glittering as he was surrounded by 4 figures, those followers of his whom he had brought with him to the windswept realm. After a moment of hesitation, a look of determination could be seen in his eyes, and he said, Activate the stellar alteration grand magic. His 4 followers didn't respond. However, their appearances gradually began to change until they all looked like Lin Kong. Even their auras seemed the same. Then, they sped off in 4 different directions. As for Lin Kong, he picked a different direction to flee in. Almost in the same instant that Lin Kong's 4 followers sped off, incredible pressure suddenly weighed down on the 4th nation. The lands quaked and the air distorted. Lin Kong and his 4 followers all trembled. "He's here, how could he be so fast? This is impossible," Lin Kong said, his face falling. He instantly unleashed a secret magic, dispersing his aura and fleeing at top speed. Meng Hao's killing intent raged as he entered the 4th nation. He immediately sent his divine sense out and, in the blink of an eye, sensed the 5 auras. He frowned, then sped toward the nearest one. Booms echoed out through the 4th nation. It only took the space of 10 breaths for him to reach the source of one of Lin Kong's auras, and what he found was a cultivator who looked exactly like Lin Kong. As soon as the cultivator saw him, his face fell and he backed up. Meng Hao waved a finger to employ the 8th demon sealing hex, causing the man to lurch to a stop. Next, his entire world was overturned by Meng Hao's palm, which latched onto the top of his head. Soul search. Meng Hao's voice was as cold as the wind in the middle of winter. When it blew past the cultivator's ears, the man's head filled with indescribable pain. He began to tremble and then screamed. Chapter 1107. Goal, number 1 in the echelon. The cultivator's face twisted and screams of pain echoed out in all directions. Everyone who heard them was shocked to the core and could scarcely even imagine how such pain could be possible. It was something almost beyond description. 1. I have to be honest about something. In the original Chinese, it actually says that the feeling is impossible to describe. However, the following sentence then provides a description. We cleverly inserted the word almost to ensure that everything made sense. At best, you could say it felt like a hand being shoved into your brain and rifling around violently. Blood sprayed from the cultivator's mouth, and he suddenly went as stiff as a board. He was dead. Despite his death, his corpse still adhered to Meng Hao's hand and did not fall to the ground. After a few breaths of time, Meng Hao's eyes glittered. "Lin Kong, huh? So you turned your 4 followers into doppelgangers to try to pull a fast one on me." He lowered his hand, and the cultivator's corpse dropped toward the ground. Before it could even land, Meng Hao had shot off into the distance. He sent his divine sense out into a wide area, looking for Lin Kong's true form. However, Lin Kong's magical technique was strange, and Meng Hao could find no weaknesses in it. The remaining 4 figures sped rapidly off in different directions. Another strange thing was that their auras were all slowly fading. It wouldn't be too long before they would disappear from Meng Hao's divine sense altogether. Lin Kong's original plan had been to ensure that there was no aura for Meng Hao to detect at all. If he did spend time searching, at most, he would find the 4 cultivators he had switched bodies with. However, Lin Kong could never have predicted that Meng Hao would arrive in the 4th nation so quickly. Instead of crossing through the other nations, he had chosen to pass directly over the central temple. That formed a kink in his plan. However, everything could be resolved as long as enough time passed. Meng Hao gave a cold harumph. He patted his bag of holding, and numerous blackbud imps flew out, which he sent screaming out in all directions. They were like black bolts of lighting, emanating murderous auras. Under the control of Meng Hao's divine sense, they sped out in pursuit, whereas Meng Hao did nothing. He did no pursuing whatsoever. He simply hovered there in midair above the 4th nation, equidistant from all of the fleeing versions of Lin Kong. His method for determining which one was Lin Kong was a simple one. He would just wait to see what happened when the blackbud imps tried to possess the 4 different figures. Success or failure didn't matter. Either way, he would get some clues. Soon he looked up. "Gotcha," he said, vanishing. Meanwhile, near the border between the 4th and 3rd nations, Lin Kong had an extremely unsightly look on his face. He was surrounded by more than 10 screaming blackbud imps, all of whom were trying to possess him. What are these things? Lin Kong had a powerful cultivation base, but right now he was reduced to about 60% of his power. As for the blackbud imps, their possession technique was bizarre. If they failed, they would transform it into a piercing divine sense attack that Lin Kong was having a hard time dealing with. A sensation of deadly crisis welled up in him, and he began to tremble. As the feeling of imminent death grew stronger, he began to shake even more violently. "I'm not going to die here." Filled with regret, he sent a mighty wind blowing out to drive away the seemingly unkillable blackbud imps. Then he gritted his teeth and, despite his weakened form, once again unleashed his paragon magic. The golden holy requiem skull materialized in front of him, not as a way to attack the blackpot imps, but as a means of trying to find a way out of his current situation. Lin Kang's face went pale as he realized there was no such way out. Impossible, heaven never cuts off all paths. There's always hope in every situation. Eyes gleaming with a vicious look, he bit the tip of his tongue, causing his body to wither rapidly. His hair even turned white. He went all out, sacrificing even his longevity in an attempt to get his paragon magic to reveal a means of escape. Rumbling could be heard, and Lin Kang's body continued to wither, when finally he found what he was looking for in the holy requiem skull. After he saw it, he gaped in shock, then, laughing maniacally, viciously smacked his own chest. A huge blob of blood spurted out, which then splashed down onto the ground. His laughter grew more and more intense as he spun around, a look of determination on his face. He then pushed his finger down onto his forehead, sending a tremor through his body. His eyes suddenly went blurry, but rapidly grew clear again. He glanced at the holy requiem skull and realized that he was now missing some of the memories he had before. Expression serious, he headed off into the distance. Before too long, he was once again surrounded by blackpot imps. At the same time, a long beam of light appeared in the air not too far off, radiating killing intent. "Lin Kang!" roared Meng Hao, his voice rumbling like thunder filled with heavenly might, causing Lin Kang to shake. His divine sense was blessed with 20% of the chi flow of the windswept realm, transforming his voice into thunder from heaven and surrounding his body with a lake of lightning. Lin Kang was nearly deafened by Meng Hao's voice. His mind spun, and blood sprayed out of his mouth. After reforming his body, he had only possessed 60% of his original cultivation base, making it very difficult to use his paragon magic. In fact, wasting his longevity and life force the way he had just now caused his cultivation base to drop even further, until it was at only 30% of its original strength. It didn't matter how strong he was before. With a cultivation base like that, he was like a candle flickering in the wind. Meng Hao's mere voice shook his heart and caused blood to spray out of his mouth. There was nothing he could possibly do to fight back. All he could do was scream miserably and look up with an unyielding expression. He hated Han Qinglei and hated the fact that he had greedily tried to snatch the Eighth Nation's world seal. The end result had been complete ruin. He also hated fate. The speed of Meng Hao's pursuit had ruined all of his preparations. All he had needed was another hour, and then he would have disappeared without a trace. But now everything had changed, and there was nothing he could do about it. "The heavens want to destroy me. Well, I'm not willing to die by your hand, Meng Hao." Lin Kang began to laugh, a loud, shrill laughter. "You want to know about Su Qing? Well, come on," he screamed as he hovered there in midair. "Soul search me if you want, scrape the information out of my brain, I don't care. I just want you give me an honorable death." He was in the echelon, and second in power only to the echelon cultivator from the first mountain. He was a blazing sun in the fourth mountain, and he was a proud person. Even if he died, he wanted to die with honor. Meng Hao shot toward him like lightning. Without the slightest hesitation, he reached out and placed his hand onto the top of Lin Kang's head. Meng Hao wouldn't believe anything that Lin Kang told him about Su Qing. He needed to see it for himself. He unleashed his soul search magic, pouring his divine sense into Lin Kang's brain. Images from Lin Kang's life passed through his mind until finally he saw Su Qing. She actually looked exactly the same as she had before entering reincarnation. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the world, but her face was etched eternally onto Meng Hao's heart. Lin Kang trembled from the indescribable pain. He clenched his teeth tightly and didn't groan or moan at all. His eyes began to fade and his body was shaking. However, his subconscious mind demanded honor. A moment later, Meng Hao lifted his hand away and blood sprayed out of Lin Kang's mouth. His expression was blank and his body was still trembling. His mind was gone, and apparently the only thing he had left was his honor. Meng Hao said nothing. He now knew that when Lin Kang had said that Su Qing would die if he did, it had been a complete fabrication. Actually, Meng Hao had already come to the conclusion earlier that such a thing wasn't possible. He took another look at Lin Kang, then pulled his hand back and tapped his forehead. A massive power poured through him, wiping out any life that was left. Lin Kang shuddered, and for a brief moment his eyes became bright and lucid. Then he closed them and died. His corpse dropped down to the ground, but his bag of holding was snatched by Meng Hao. Inside was the Fourth Nation's world seal. "Kinger," he murmured, "so you're a disciple of K. Siddhigarbha on the Fourth Mountain." Just wait for me, Kinger. Once I'm out of this windswept realm, I'm coming for you." Then he turned and disappeared in a flash of light. He left the fourth nation, passing back through the central temple region and entering the ninth nation. All of a sudden, a tremor ran through him, and he turned to look back at the fourth nation. "Something's off. I killed the echelon cultivator from the fourth mountain. According to the natural law of the windswept realm, shouldn't I be rewarded for breaking a previous record?" Putting his thoughts aside of Su Qing, he suddenly reviewed everything that had happened with Lin Kong. Finally, his eyes widened. He then smacked his bag of holding and produced a promissory note. After looking at it carefully, he confirmed that it was Lin Kong's promissory note, and then he suddenly smiled. These people definitely deserve to be in the echelon. Han Qinglei had his schemes and Lin Kong his plots. It seems that truly killing them won't be easy. "So you're not dead, Lin Kong. However, you will have no chances to rise to prominence here in the windswept realm. You'll be forced to hide from me, not daring to even stick your head out. I may not be able to track you down and kill you, but I've slaughtered your heart. I've planted a shadow there, ensuring that I become your inner devil. You're not the first, nor will you be the last. The windswept realm is the location where I, Meng Hao, will rise to prominence in the 9 mountains and seas. I will rise to prominence in the echelon. When I leave this place, I will do so as the number 1 in the echelon." He did not return to the fourth nation to continue searching for Lin Kong. Lin Kong's life or death didn't concern him anymore. With the status Su Qing currently had in the fourth mountain, she was not somebody that could easily be trifled with. Meng Hao flashed through the air toward Mount Whiteseal. After all of his years practicing cultivation, it was only during these battles that he had gradually formed a unique, domineering style that was all his own. Chapter 11:08, Entering All Heaven Again. Hidden beneath the domineering air, however, was something others could never detect: the con. For example, Lin Kong's promissory note. Even Lin Kong knew nothing about that. He had unwittingly fallen for Meng Hao's scheme. That promissory note had come during their first battle, when Meng Hao utilized the 7 God steps. When Lin Kong's attention had been fully preoccupied by the surging energy created by it, he secretly went about creating the promissory note. He did it that way intentionally, just in case he didn't manage to kill Lin Kong or if he escaped. That way, he wouldn't come out completely empty-handed. At the very least, he would have a promissory note. Then the next time they met, he could loudly declare that Lin Kong owed him money. He would never have imagined that his promissory note habit would end up providing proof that Lin Kong wasn't dead. As for exactly why he wasn't dead, the answer came to him on the way back to Mount Whiteseal. "Echelon cultivators can be killed twice without their soul being exterminated," he murmured, thinking back to what Paragon C Dream had told him all those years ago. It was a special ability unique to the echelon. The only way for an echelon cultivator to truly be exterminated was to kill that person twice and then a third time. That last kill would be their final death. In turn, whoever killed them would be half a step into the echelon. The rest of that half step was to travel to the ruins of immortality in their mountain and sea and find Paragon C Dream. Then they could get the other half of the mark and truly become a new member of the echelon. As he sped through the air, Meng Hao reached up and touched the place on his forehead where the echelon mark was concealed. At about the same time that Meng Hao returned to the 9th nation, something happened back in the 4th nation. During Lin Kong's flight, he had spit up a glob of blood which had long since soaked into the ground. Now, that patch of ground suddenly trembled, and a hand stretched up. The hand was as flawless as white jade, like that of a newborn baby. It trembled, and the earth shook for a moment before exploding out as a figure stood up. It was Lin Kong. His face was pale, but his cultivation base was different than it had been earlier. Apparently, it was completely restored to its original peak. However, his body was trembling. After taking a few breaths, he roared, "Meng Hao!" His face twisted with intense rage and hatred. "In the 4th mountain and sea, in all the deadly situations I encountered, I never used up one of my lives. I never imagined that you would actually push me into a corner and kill me. The enmity between us is irreconcilable." He gnashed his teeth, and he even thought about retaliating against Su Qing after he got back to the 4th mountain, to use her to get revenge against Meng Hao. However, when he considered that Su Qing was the princess of the 49th cavern, he realized that despite the fact that she was Meng Hao's weak spot, it was actually impossible for him to do anything to her. The realization filled him with bitterness. He suddenly realized that, even though he was still alive, Meng Hao had become his inner devil. He stamped his foot down onto the ground and then flew into the air toward the national Aura Mountain. There was no way to vent his overflowing hatred. Even if he felt that he couldn't exist under the same sky as Meng Hao, the next time they met, all he would do was flee. He did not dare to go up against him. Currently, he was even wondering if Meng Hao knew that he wasn't dead. Naturally, Meng Hao was completely aware of that fact. Currently, he was landing on Mount Whiteseal, where he sat down cross-legged and flicked his sleeve to produce 2 tongues of flame. These were none other than the world seals from the 4th nation and the 8th nation. The 2 flames flickered up into the hand of the statue, where they lined up with the 9th nation's world seal. The 3 flames made the essences and natural laws even more majestic. Meng Hao took a deep breath. Not wasting any time, he focused on contemplation. He had long since realized that, after taking the world seal of the 4th nation, he no longer possessed 20% of the windswept realm's chi flow, but rather 30%. As he contemplated enlightenment, time passed. The overall structure of the windswept realm changed due to the defeats of Lin Kong and Han Qinglei. The 4th nation and the 8th nation were routed and were eliminated from the central battlefield. The other 6 nations continued to fight their bloody battles. However, the 9th nation had risen to prominence in the war, causing the cultivators from the other nations to join forces against it in resistance. Before long, the intense fighting led to a chaotic battle situation. Van Donger and Bei Yu began switching off with other cultivators from the 9th mountain and sea, so that there were some of them constantly fighting, almost as if they were unwilling to return from the battlefield. It was as if they could find peace in the fighting, and would not be influenced by their desires. Half a month flashed by. The speed with which he was gaining enlightenment of the 3 world seals was rapidly increased because of the blessing of 30% of the chi flow of the windswept realm. By this point, he had gained enlightenment of nearly 500 essences. And he wasn't finished. During the half-month, the fighting in the central region changed as more echelon cultivators gained enlightenment of their respective world seals. The battles grew even more chaotic. In order to snatch the world seals from other nations, it was first necessary to weaken them, which could only be done by gaining an advantage in the central region. Under the control of the echelon cultivators, the armies in the central region fought with increased intensity. Occasionally, certain countries would suffer defeats, and the red beams of light coming from their pagodas would grow dim. At that point, other echelon cultivators would enter that nation to begin fighting. During the half-month, fierce fighting went on in virtually all of the national Aura Mountains of the various nations. There were both victories and defeats, but through it all there were only 2 mountains that no one dared to enter. One was the First Nation's Mountain of National Fate, which was controlled by the echelon cultivator from the First Mountain. No one dared to encroach on his territory. The second nation was Meng Hao's Mount Whiteseal, in the 9th nation. Although all the other echelon cultivators were aware of how many world seals he had, after his battle with Han Qinglei and then his defeat of Lin Kong, he had settled his position. None of the other echelon cultivators were confident enough to take him on. It was in this fashion that 7 more days passed. Suddenly, a boundless light rose up from Mount Whiteseal, within which Meng Hao opened his eyes. He slowly stood up and made a grasping motion with his right hand, causing the 3 flames to fly over into his palm, where they vanished. 3 world seals, 900 great Taos, 900 essences. All of that information was burned into his heart. Although he wasn't able to actually wield any of them, the sense of accomplishment he felt caused his aura to be completely different than before. He looked more elegant than before, and as he stood there, it seemed as if he were connected with the whole world. The light began to fade away, and he closed his eyes. When he opened them again moments later, he suddenly produced his second nirvana fruit. His eyes glittered as he pushed the fruit into his forehead. In the instant the nirvana fruit contacted his forehead, a familiar sensation filled him. A massive tempestuous roar filled his mind, causing him to feel as though his head were about to explode. He began to grow taller. 15 meters, 24 meters, 30 meters, 39 meters. His fleshly body was ripped and torn. An intense pain rushed through him that was nothing like the last time he had temporarily absorbed the second nirvana fruit. This time, his fleshly body was not in the immortal realm, but rather in the ancient realm. His ancient realm fleshly body rumbled as it grew. Of his 9 soul lamps, 2 had previously been lit. Now, the 3rd and 4th began to burn, and a tiny spark appeared in the 5th. His fleshly body power was increasing explosively. His heart began to pound loudly, and then thunder began to boom around him as if it were cheering him on. A power more terrifying than his ancient realm fleshly body began to flourish within him. Soon he was 60 meters tall, and he looked like a giant, his head raised, surging energy giving rise to madly whipping winds. He trembled as a tempest raged inside of him, tearing him apart. It was almost as if his chi passageways were going to be completely destroyed. The nirvana fruit was like a key that unlocked terrifying power within his blood. Once again, shocking fluctuations began to flow through his veins. Meng Hao could clearly sense that his 123 immortal meridians were now ripping apart, and then forming back together into a single immortal meridian. Although it was only one immortal meridian, it formed something like a painting which showed the outline of a perfect circle. His cultivation base rose up rapidly, and his every breath seemed to cause peals of thunder to echo out as he sucked in all of the energy of heaven and earth that existed in the area. Power like this was something that far exceeded the immortal emperor realm. The mountains shook, and the lands quaked. All of the living things in the Ninth Nation could suddenly sense the shocking and domineering power that now existed on Mount Whiteseal. The people who could sense it most clearly were the disciples of the various sects in the Ninth Nation, especially Jian Daozi. His face fell as he and all the other cultivators of the Ninth Nation looked off into the distance with expressions of shock. As of this moment, Meng Hao was surrounded by the color azure. Azure represented the all-heaven. The all-heaven represented the infinite. Radiant azure light radiated off of Meng Hao as he threw his head back and roared. The sky shook, and massive winds blew. This time, Meng Hao was able to endure for 20 breaths of time before his body trembled, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. He staggered backward as the nirvana fruit emerged and fell down into his hand. Although he now looked quite disheveled, his eyes gleamed with obsession and excitement. Gaining enlightenment of the essences, really, will help me absorb the second nirvana fruit. I now understand 900 essences, which lets me stay in that terrifying state for 20 breaths of time, which is much longer than before. According to my calculations, if I can gain enlightenment of 3,000 essences, then I should be able to permanently remain in the all-heaven immortal realm. This hope caused him to throw his head back and laugh loudly. Besides, the first time I tried to absorb my second nirvana fruit, it wasted much of the energy in my body, so much so that I couldn't even stand up. But now, it only took 30% of my energy. Chapter 11:09. The Echelon War truly begins. As the nirvana fruit sank down, the shield surrounding Mount Whiteseal faded away, but the light shining off of Meng Hao grew stronger. He took a deep breath and then stepped off of the mountain and into the air. The wind battered him, and although his hair whipped about, not a bit of his aura could be blown away. It was as if the energy belonging to Meng Hao couldn't be touched at all by the wind, but rather influenced the entire world around him. I've already gained complete enlightenment of 3 world seals. If I want to completely absorb the nirvana fruit, I'll need more sealing marks. Meng Hao's energy rocketed up, and he overflowed with the desire to fight. His eyes flashed like lightning as he shot off into the distance. As he left the Ninth Nation, his goal was to slaughter his way into other nations, to defeat their echelon cultivators and steal their sealing marks. He would take advantage of this opportunity in the windswept realm to seize his greatest available good fortune, which was to become an all-heaven immortal. He would become number 1 in the echelon. Boom! He turned into a streak of bright light that sped through the sky for less time than it takes half an incense stick to burn. Then, he suddenly stopped and looked down toward the ground. He was still in the Ninth Nation, and far below he had just noticed a vein of immortal jade deep under the ground. The human cultivator from the mountain and sea realm was still there, and although he couldn't see Meng Hao could see him. The man appeared to be mired in madness, completely lost. When Meng Hao saw the immortal jade, a feeling of desire suddenly rose up in his heart, but he immediately quashed it. I love money, but I'm my own master. I'll never let material things control me, he said coolly. As he crushed the invisible fetters, a shattering sound seemed to echo about in his mind. He turned away and ignored everything down below as he sped off into the distance. In the final 7 days in which Meng Hao had gained enlightenment of the world seal, the echelon cultivators in other parts of the windswept realm were all thrown into a state of chaos by the shocking events which occurred. The First Nation's echelon cultivator attacked the Second Nation, completely defeating the echelon cultivator there. Only by sacrificing one of his lives was he able to flee. Of course, the Second Nation's world seal was then completely undefended and was taken away by the First Nation's echelon cultivator, who completely leveled the entire national aura mountain to get to it. After that, the echelon cultivators from the Fifth and Sixth Nations fought each other. The shocking battle shook heaven and earth and resulted in both sides sustaining heavy injuries. In a critical moment, the First Nation's echelon cultivator appeared. He ignored the Third Nation's mountain, passing directly through to the two fighting echelon cultivators, whom he took on himself. That battle was shocking to the extreme, and in the end, the entire Fifth Nation was destroyed. Their national aura mountain toppled, and in the end, both echelon cultivators from the Fifth and Sixth Nations were defeated, and the Fifth Nation's world seal was taken. No one knew whether or not the Fifth Nation's echelon cultivator was killed, but in either case, nobody could find him after the battle. The Sixth Nation's echelon cultivator returned to his national aura mountain, severely injured. After these things happened, the First Nation's echelon cultivator seemed to be invincible, capable of sweeping over all of heaven and earth, leaving everyone astonished. Of the windswept realm's 9 world seals, the echelon cultivator from the First Mountain and Meng Hao each had 3. The others remained in the Third, Sixth, and Seventh Nations respectively. The war had spread out from the central region to the echelon members themselves. It was about that time that Meng Hao reached the Eighth Nation. He didn't pause for even a moment, speeding through the air like a meteor, passing over the Eighth Nation as he headed toward the Seventh Nation. His aura surged mightily, growing ever stronger. Before long, he reached the Seventh Nation, and when he entered it, intense pressure roiled out from its national aura mountain. The source was none other than the echelon cultivator of the Seventh Nation, Xianxia, the young man with the incredibly murderous aura. He currently stood on the mountain peak, hand curled around the haft of a long spear, looking up into the sky with a gleam of anticipation in his eyes. 1. Xianxia's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Yuan. Yuan is an uncommon 2-character surname. Jian means strong or unyielding. It's not my custom to sit around waiting for people to come fight me, he said coolly. He took a step forward, abandoning the defenses of the national aura mountain as he flew directly in Meng Hao's direction. The entire Seventh Nation trembled as Meng Hao and Xianxia sped toward each other through the sky. When Meng Hao caught sight of Xianxia, he didn't slow down in the least bit. Instead, he sped up and prepared to attack. When Xianxia saw Meng Hao, he let out a cold snort. His murderous aura exploded to the sky, and just like Meng Hao, he didn't hold back but instead pushed himself faster. In the blink of an eye, the two of them collided in midair above the Seventh Nation. A huge boom rang out and everything shook. A massive fissure ripped open in the sky between them, and a huge shockwave exploded out. Meng Hao, cried Xianxia, flying backward. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, after which he threw his head back and laughed. His entire person exploded with the desire to do battle. He hefted his long spear, which thrummed as countless slain souls suddenly appeared, looking incredibly ferocious. Listen up, fool. I'm Xianxia, echelon cultivator from the Seventh Mountain. Meng Hao, do you dare to make a bet with me? If you win, I won't just hand over the Seventh Nation's world seal, but I'll trade it with you. The prerequisite is that you qualify to fight me. If you lose, then you have to give one of your 3 world seals to me. Xianxia's voice echoed about, and he took a step forward, a domineering air swirling around him continuously. Meng Hao also began to stride forward, eyes glittering. From their initial contact moments ago, Meng Hao could instantly tell that Xianxia's fleshly body was at roughly the same level as his own. A body cultivator, he thought, his eyes gleaming brightly. He had an ancient realm fleshly body, yet didn't come close to being an authentic body cultivator. In fact, the only true body cultivator he had ever met was the burly demonic cultivator. However, that man was an amateur and couldn't be considered truly powerful in terms of body cultivation. But now, Meng Hao could sense that Xianxia was a true body cultivator. Looking him over, he could see a faintly red glow coming off of Xianxia. He must have bathed in the blood of a god, he thought. Well, do you dare? Asked Xianxia, his voice booming. He swept his spear out in front of him, causing a massive rumbling sound to ring out. The air vibrated and even seemed to be on the verge of shattering as a massive energy surged off of Xianxia. He stood there like a celestial warrior, bursting with the mad desire to fight. I could fart better proposals than that bet of yours, Meng Hao said coolly, but as for your challenge to a duel, how could I not accept? He clenched his right hand into a fist and then unleashed a punch. His fist and Yuan Jian's spear almost instantly slammed into each other, and an ear-splitting boom rang out. The flexible spear absorbed the backlash and was deflected away, and Yuan Jian fell back again. Blood poured out of his mouth, and when he looked up, his expression was even more maddened than before. He tossed the spear aside, licked the blood off of his lips, and stared at Meng Hao with bloodshot eyes. That runt-hand Kinglei wasn't a match for you, and you also defeated the Sisipant's Lin Kong. You're strong, Meng Hao, but I'm even stronger. Did you really think that Lin Kong was actually the second most powerful after the echelon cultivator from the first mountain, Dao Heaven? 1. Unfortunately, this is a point where, because of the nature of Chinese, a minor spoiler is necessitated. Essentially, Dao Heaven is a Taoist name, not this guy's actual name. However, in Chinese, you wouldn't necessarily know that. The two characters are Chinese letter, which are Dao and Heaven respectively. However, Dao could also be a surname, so at first sight you wouldn't know it was a Taoist name. That list was made 30 years ago, and besides, being in the echelon requires finding your own correct path. The difference in power between us members was once vast. Back then, I might not have been a match for Lin Kong, but now, I could defeat him easily. Even Dao Heaven's title of #1 most powerful echelon cultivator is just that, a title. He isn't necessarily the most powerful. Yuan Jian laughed, and his desire to do battle surged. He then charged toward Meng Hao in a blur, unleashing a vicious palm strike. As the palm ripped through the air, sonic booms echoed out. The air around Meng Hao distorted, as if power from all directions were being sucked in by Yuan Jian's palm strike. Meng Hao didn't flinch back. He strode forward, unleashing the 7 God steps. However, in that moment, Yuan Jian smiled ferociously, threw his head back and roared. "Sealing magic," he cried, causing the sky to tremble. The power of a sealing mark descended not toward Meng Hao, but the area around him. It transformed into a cage, with Meng Hao and Yuan Jian being locked inside. However, because of the cage, Meng Hao was unable to utilize the 7 God steps to borrow energy from the surroundings. "I was ready for that Taoist magic," laughed Yuan Jian, advancing forward again. He roared, and his body suddenly began to grow larger. In the blink of an eye, he was fully twice as large as before, and from the look of it, half of the power of his fleshly body was now converged in his right arm. He was clearly vastly different than moments ago, and as he swung his right arm, shocking power erupted. His chi and blood rumbled, and anyone who was sensitive to auras, even if they were some distance away, would be able to sense the towering bloody glow that rose off of him. It was like a bright lamp in the middle of the night. "Die!" he roared as his fist rocketed out with power, seemingly capable of shaking heaven and earth. Meng Hao's face was calm. Freeing himself from the cage wouldn't be difficult. However, now that he had encountered a true body cultivator like Yuan Jian, his desire to fight boiled hotter than ever. As Yuan Jian closed in, Meng Hao clenched his hand into a fist and leaped forward. Instantly, an aura was unleashed that seemed capable of destroying the heavens and exterminating all life. That power of extermination converged in Meng Hao's fist, creating a true power of life extermination. The life extermination fist. The air around them shattered as 2 streaks of light could be seen speeding through the air toward each other. Then, Meng Hao's punch collided with the power of Yuan Jian's fleshly body, and a huge boom echoed out. Heaven was rent and the earth collapsed. Everything quaked violently. Vibrations ran through Meng Hao as he fell back several dozen paces. The shocking power from body cultivator Yuan Jian left him shaken and visibly moved. And yet, his desire to fight grew stronger. Blood sprayed out of Yuan Jian's mouth as he staggered backward several hundred meters. When he looked up, an invincible will to fight could be seen in his eyes. He threw his head back and laughed uproariously. "Exhilarating. All right, Meng Hao, let's see if you can handle another punch. If you survive, then I'll happily loan you my world seal to contemplate." Chapter 11:10. What are you doing? As Yuan Jian's laughter rang out in the air, he suddenly took a deep breath, and then a sound like that of a windstorm exploded up around him. The air in the area collapsed, as if his single breath was sucking in all of the energy of heaven and earth around him to merge into his body. The result was that his body grew rapidly until he was over 18 meters tall. 6 times 9 God body first transformation. Yuan Jian roared as his body then explosively grew from 18 meters to a shocking 27 meters tall. He looked like a giant, hovering there in mid-air exuding shocking pressure. 1. Yuan Jian, Yuan's god body increases his height by multiples of zhang with each transformation. It starts with 6 zhang or 18 meters, and then increases by multiples of 9 after that. He lifted his right hand up and clenched it into a fist, which he held out toward Meng Hao. It was a simple motion, but the cracking sounds which rang out as a result caused the air to shatter. He let out another roar, and he looked like a mountain as he then charged toward Meng Hao. He was enormous, but he moved with unbelievable speed. In the blink of an eye he was in front of Meng Hao, his enormous fist punching out with terrifying, exterminating power. Meng Hao's eyes glowed with a strange light. His blood surged through his veins, and his desire to fight was strong as Yuan's fist closed in. He took a deep breath, and although his energy didn't surge in the same way Yuan's had, but his aura still shot up madly with that single breath. A madness rose up, a madness like that of bedevilment. It was a determination like nothing else, something that disregarded everything, even the shattering of all bones, in the pursuit of cutting out a swath of blood. That entire will was focused into a single punch that rumbled through the air. This was Meng Hao's second body cultivator fist strike. The self-immolation fist, also known as the bedevilment fist. A huge boom filled the air as Meng Hao and Yuan slammed into each other. The lands trembled, mountains collapsed, and the sky flashed. Meng Hao let out a muffled grunt and staggered backward about 20 paces. When he looked up, he saw Yuan flying through the air like a kite with its string cut, blood spraying from his mouth. Meng Hao's single punch had sent him spinning, and it looked like his body was on the verge of being shredded to pieces. Second transformation. Third transformation. Fourth transformation. Yuan's voice boomed out as he fell back, and his body continued to grow larger until he was 108 meters tall. Now he really was a giant with explosive energy. Roaring, he finally came to a stop, and then braced himself and prepared to fight back against Meng Hao's bedevilment fist. As he strode forward, he said, "Fifth transformation." Another roar could be heard as he grew even taller. By the time Meng Hao reached him, he was 135 meters tall. From a distance, Meng Hao looked completely insignificant. However, that seemingly insignificant frame contained a power that caused even Yuan's fleshly body to tremble. Meng Hao's eyes were as cold as ice. Yuan had said his punch from moments ago would be his last one, but here he was attacking again. Meng Hao was losing patience. Suddenly, his fist opened up into a palm. Such a motion should have caused a drop in his momentum, but instead, shocking ripples spread out. It was as if his palm had fused with world to become the will of heaven. As of this moment, outside of the sealed cage area, a massive pressure seemed to be weighing down, an awakening aura that pierced through the seal and settled onto Meng Hao. His open palm then slowly clenched back into a fist, causing the aura to explode out like the will of heaven, unleashing an intense, indescribable killing intent. "God-slaying," Meng Hao said coolly. However, in the moment that he spoke, the attacking Yuan suddenly shivered as he felt a sensation of unprecedented deadly crisis well up inside of him. It was indescribably intense, and he had the premonition that if he went through with his attack, he would end up dead. Damn it, how can he be so strong? He must have been holding back his strength when he was fighting with Lin Kong. Yuan's face fell and his surging energy suddenly faded away. He instantly backed up, shrinking down to his normal size. Then, his face extremely serious, he angrily said, "Brother Meng Hao, what are you doing?" "Well, what do you think you're doing? Didn't we have an agreement? We were just comparing fighting tips, right? I can't believe you're using lethal attacks." "As brothers, this really pains me. We might have just met each other, but we became friends at first sight. There's no need try to kill each other. You qualify to exchange world seals with me." "Ha ha ha. Brother, I already said that last fist strike was my last one, and I always keep my word." Yuan didn't seem to feel the least bit uncomfortable or embarrassed to switch from being arrogant and condescending to calling Meng Hao brother. His expression was one of complete sincerity, just as a body cultivator should be. He exuded an air of complete honesty and forthrightness. "About trading for the world seal, brother Meng Hao, why don't we go to the 7th Nation's National Aura Mountain together? Trading for the world seal means that we won't have to damage our relationship. Plus, you can gain enlightenment of further essences. What possible downside could there be?" A strange expression appeared on Meng Hao's face, and he cleared his throat as he relaxed his fist. "That would be for the best. Please follow me." Yuan gave an inward sigh of relief, then laughed heartily as he led the way. He and Meng Hao transformed into 2 beams of bright light that shot toward the 7th Nation's National Aura Mountain. Before long, they arrived, and since Meng Hao had been invited by Yuan Jian, the National Aura Mountain's defenses did not target him. Once they arrived at the statue, Yuan Jian made a grasping motion, causing the flame of the world seal to float over and hover atop his palm. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he extended his hand in a similar fashion, causing a world seal flame to appear. The two of them stared at each other warily for a moment before waving hands and exchanging the two flames. Yuan Jian smiled, then nodded and sat down cross-legged. He didn't immediately begin to contemplate enlightenment, but rather looked at Meng Hao and waited for him to begin. After all, once the process started, there was no way to suddenly stop it. If one person started without the other, neither would feel comfortable about the situation. Furthermore, Yuan Jian wasn't willing to just hand over the Seventh Nation's world seal permanently. After a moment of thought, Meng Hao waved his left hand, causing blackpud imps to spread out around the area and act as Dharma protectors. Then he sat down and looked at the flame in his hand. Yuan Jian took a deep breath, causing bright lights to begin to swirl around him, which transformed into a protective shield. They exchanged a final glance, and without saying anything else, simultaneously sank into contemplation. Immediately, tremors ran through their bodies. Remaining ever vigilant against each other, both began to focus on essences and natural law. Time passed by. 3 days later, they had both reached a critical juncture in their contemplation. Although Yuan Jian had not previously received a blessing of qi flow from the windswept realm like Meng Hao had, this was his home turf, and therefore, his process of enlightenment went quickly. Conversely, Meng Hao was not on his native Mount Whiteseal, but instead on the Seventh Nation's National Aura Mountain. That should have made his speed of enlightenment much slower, but he had the benefit of the qi flow of the windswept realm. Therefore, although his speed was slightly slower, it was a speed that he could accept, putting him just slightly ahead of Yuan Jian. However, on the 4th day, just when Meng Hao was on the verge of completion, the pressure in the Seventh Nation increased dramatically, and rumbling sounds filled the air. Yuan Jian's eyes snapped open, and a grim look appeared on his face. "Someone's coming," he growled. Being in the midst of contemplating enlightenment, however, there was very little he could do. He looked over at Meng Hao, who had also opened his eyes, and was frowning as he looked off into the distance. Not too much time passed before 3 beams of light appeared, speeding through the air. In the lead position was a young man with half-black, half-white hair. He wasn't just handsome, he was beautiful and had a glittering echelon mark on his forehead. He was followed by 2 other cultivators, a man and a woman. Both appeared to be young, but they emanated terrifying cultivation base auras. They were in the ancient realm, with 5 extinguished soul lamps each. Furthermore, the feeling they gave off was not that of ordinary ancient realm cultivation bases. They seemed more powerful, indicating that these were chosen. Dao Heaven's #1 follower, the 11th echelon cultivator, Hai Dongking. 1. Hai Dongking's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Hai Dongking. Hai means sea but can also be a surname. Dong means east. Qing is a color, usually green, blue, cyan, or azure, but sometimes black. Yuan Jian's face flickered and his eyes went wide. "Follower Hai Dongking?" Meng Hao asked. Hai Dongking used to be like me, an echelon cultivator from the 7th mountain. However, after he was defeated by Dao Heaven, he inexplicably joined his entourage. As an echelon cultivator, it's a complete disgrace to become the follower of some other person. Yuan Jian gritted his teeth and stared at the 3 incoming cultivators. Damn it, shouldn't Dao Heaven's goal be the 3rd and 6th nations? I can't believe he's ignoring them and focusing here. Yuan Jian's face flickered, and he cursed inwardly. His contemplation of enlightenment was still incomplete, making it impossible for him to fight. "Do you have a grudge with Hai Dongking?" Meng Hao asked suddenly. Yuan Jian's face darkened further and he nodded. "I killed him once years ago." Considering that they were both echelon cultivators from the 7th mountain and sea, there was little wonder that they had a hard time maintaining a good relationship, and had ended up fighting to the death. Meng Hao sat there quietly for a moment while Yuan Jian ground his teeth. Although Yuan Jian couldn't attack personally, he could summon help. He smacked his hand down onto the ground, and rumbling sounds echoed out through the 7th nation. Shockingly, numerous holes suddenly appeared all over his body, which then exploded, revealing a group of figures. They were puppets, dozens of them, with powerful cultivation bases. Meng Hao's eyes widened slightly, but given that Yuan Jian was also in the echelon, it was only natural that he would have some tricks that he wouldn't reveal without good cause. Almost as soon as the puppets appeared, Hai Dongking began to descend from above, his hair floating around him, his body radiating shocking energy. "So we meet again, you and Giant." Hatred gleamed in Haidonking's eyes. His voice was soft and effeminate as he floated over. His gaze then shifted to Meng Hao. "Meng Hao, I never imagined I would find you here. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I guess today I'll get to take 4 world seals for elder brother Dao Heaven." Yuan Jian's eyes went wide and he started cursing loudly. "Elder brother Dao Heaven? What bullshit. You're nothing more than Dao Heaven's lackey, you fool. How shameless do you have to be to join someone else's entourage? Ha Hai Donking." Chapter 11:11, Fatality. "Shut the hell up," roared Hai Donking, looking extremely irritated. As an echelon cultivator, the fact that he had ended up becoming Dao Heaven's follower was actually a very painful matter to him. Few people would ever dare to bring up the matter in his presence, not unless there was a blood feud between them. Even other echelon cultivators wouldn't provoke him in such a way. Only Yuan Jian dared to do so. Both of them started out in the 7th Mountain and Sea, and had numerous conflicts going back throughout the years. They had long since reached the point where neither could tolerate the other being alive. The venomous words uttered just now by Yuan Jian caused Hai Donking to give a cold harumph and then step forward. The wave of his hand instantly caused an illusory sword to shoot forward. It was an azure-colored sword that emanating blinding sword light. As soon as it appeared, it split apart into 100,000 separate swords, which soared through the air toward Yuan Jian on the National Aura Mountain. "Why the hell should I shut up, fool?" Yuan Jian cursed. "You're Dao Heaven's lackey. What, you're afraid of people saying it out loud? I won't shut up, and furthermore I'll say it again. You're a lackey, a dog. Come on, dog, try to bite me." He stuck his chin up into the air as if to say, "What are you gonna do about it?" Rumbling filled the air as the 100,000 swords slashed toward the mountain, slamming into the protective shield and causing it to distort. At the same time, the 2 cultivators off to the side laughed coldly, waving their hands to cause 2 streams of chi to swirl out, one black and one white. They merged together in midair to form a gigantic spike, which stabbed down toward the mountain. Booms rang out as the shield twisted. However, Yuan Jian's curses continued to echo through the air. "Come on, bite me, fool," he raged. "Motherfucking Hai Donking, you bitch slut. If you have the skill, come and bite me. If you dare to come at me, then I'll screw you." Meng Hao remained off to the side, looking on with a strange expression. He suddenly realized that during their fight, Yuan Jian had actually spoken to him quite respectfully. They hadn't been fighting to the death, but had they been, Meng Hao had the feeling that the harshness of Yuan Jian's cursing could only be matched by the parrot. Outside the shield, Hai Donking looked more furious than ever. Staring coldly at Yuan Jian, he waved his hand, causing the number of illusory swords spinning around him to increase to 500,000, radiating brilliant light as they slammed into the shield. The shield was weakening, and obviously these 3 cultivators were fully prepared to fight, even in the battles near the central temple. "Slut charlatan," roared Yuan Jian. "You don't have any balls at all, you fruitcake. Why don't you use the same skills you use when you service Dao Heaven? Come on." "Hai Donking, considering we're both from the 7th Mountain, you can tell me the truth, right? Between you and Dao Heaven, who gives it and who takes it? I'm really curious." As Yuan Jian let off a constant stream of curses, he took moments here and there to lower his voice and speak to Meng Hao. "Whenever I see this slut, I can't help but curse him. Sorry for getting you involved in this, brother. If your enlightenment comes quickly, then get out of here before you get killed. Just forget about me. After all, if you stick around and I get killed, then your death won't come too long after. But we might stand a better chance if we stand together, and we'll probably die if we split up. Plus, if you leave, then you won't be able to take this world seal with you. Without someone to distract them, you'd never get away. Besides, since you have the 7th Nation's world seal, if you leave with it, they'll definitely chase you down." "Anything else you want to say?" Meng Hao said coldly. Yuan Jian cleared his throat. He turned to let out another string of curses at Hai Donking, then turned back and smiled wryly at Meng Hao. "Of course there's more, but there's not enough time to explain it clearly. Anyway, go ahead and leave, brother. I'll hold them off for as long as I can." Even as he spoke, a huge crack opened up in the shield. Tearing sounds could be heard as the rip expanded, causing the entire shield to ripple. Clearly, it would only be able to hold out for a little bit longer. Hai Donking's bone-deep hatred for Yuan Jian caused him to attack with increased fervor. The male and female cultivator had profound cultivation bases. Although they weren't in the echelon and the feeling they gave off couldn't compare exactly, it was similar. They made another attack, causing 2 huge spikes to stab down toward the shield. Murderous gleams could be seen in their eyes. They weren't here to interfere with the matter between Yuan Jian and Hai Dongqing. They were here for Meng Hao and would surely receive an incredible reward if they killed him. The man and the woman were both staring at him with clear killing intent and even a gleam of avarice. They obviously wanted to take advantage of his inability to attack, to cut him down. It was at this point that Meng Hao suddenly rose to his feet. He clenched his right hand into a fist, causing the Seventh Nation's world seal to fuse into his hand. Next, he performed an incantation gesture, then waved his finger toward the shield. Immediately, numerous mountain ranges appeared outside, which smashed down toward Hai Dongqing and the other two cultivators. "Finished with your enlightenment?" Yuan Jian asked, eyes glittering brightly. Meng Hao snorted coldly. Ignoring Yuan Jian completely, he shot up into the air toward the shield. As he appeared outside, he waved his hand, summoning the Paragon Bridge. As the Paragon Bridge descended, Hai Dongqing's face flickered. He quickly performed an incantation gesture, causing a sword to appear that radiated an ancient aura. The sword was broken, with only a finger-length segment of the tip remaining. However, it radiated a frigid aura that caused a huge wind to whip up as soon as it appeared. At the same time, the aura of a paragon spread out. This was Hai Dongqing's paragon magic. With a roar, he shoved both hands out in front of him, causing the broken sword tip to fly toward the Paragon Bridge. As soon as these two grand paragon magics appeared, Meng Hao extended his right hand, within which appeared the lightning cauldron. His eyes glittered, and electricity danced around him. Suddenly, he switched places with the female cultivator. In the blink of an eye, and before anyone could react, Meng Hao performed an incantation gesture with his left hand, and then waved his hand toward the male cultivator. The essence of divine flame erupted out explosively, causing the man's face to fall. He tried to retreat, but before he could get very far, Meng Hao transformed into a golden rock, attacking in unison with the flames to slash violently at the man's chest. Flames engulfed the man and he screamed miserably. At the same time, brilliant light flickered around him, and he performing an incantation gesture, causing a suit of armor to cover him. Although it provided some bit of protection, the divine flame still bored in, inflicting intense pain. He gritted his teeth, forcing his mind into clarity, then began to fall back. However, how could Meng Hao possibly let him flee? The golden rock flickered as he returned to human form, then clenched his right hand into a fist and unleashed the bedevilment fist. A boom rang out as he struck the man's chest. The armor exploded and blood sprayed out. A look of shock covered the man's ashen face. He quickly crushed a pearl between his teeth, and as Meng Hao's second punch closed in, his body turned illusory and the fist struck nothing but air. The man fell back anxiously, screaming, "Save me!" That pearl was a life-saving magical item, something he hadn't used for a very long time, and normally kept concealed inside of his tongue. However, it only took a few moments of battle with Meng Hao before he was forced to unleash its power. Everything that was happening takes some time to describe, but in truth, from the time Meng Hao unleashed the Paragon Bridge to the moment he attacked the man, only enough time passed for a spark to fly off of a piece of flint. It was so quick that no one had any time to react. Hai Dongqing unleashed his Paragon magic a bit too slowly, making it difficult to come to the man's aid. As for the woman, she was now quite some distance away. She was about to use a minor teleportation, but apparently Meng Hao had predicted that would happen. He performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and then waved his finger at the woman. The eighth demon sealing hex transformed into invisible ripples that caused a tremor to run through the woman. She was now incapable of teleporting or of doing anything else to interfere. Killing intent flickered in Meng Hao's eyes. Without speaking a word, he shot toward the man like lightning. With the wave of his hand, 123 immortal meridians exploded with power, and 33 heavens descended. They transformed into the paw of a beast, which slashed at the retreating cultivator. A boom could be heard, and the man let out a miserable shriek. His chest burst into a cloud of blood and gore, and a look of complete and utter panic filled his face, as if he could sense death closing in on him. How could he ever have imagined that he would collapse like a brittle branch under the attacks of his opponent, without even the chance to fight back? He couldn't help but think back to the fight between Meng Hao and Lin Kong, and now he knew how Lin Kong felt. He was denied any chance to do anything, and only continued to descend into further danger. Hai Dongqing was in a rage. His body flashed as he performing an incantation gesture, causing 1,000,000 streams of sword chi to burst out. slashing toward Meng Hao to block his path to the male cultivator. The woman's face was filled with a murderous look, and she looked incredibly anxious. She and the man were beloved partners, so at the moment, her heart was tearing apart. She even burned her life force to extricate herself from the 8th hex. Blood sprayed from her mouth as she charged toward Meng Hao. "Stay your hand," she screamed shrilly. The man, who had just been on the receiving end of a series of successful attacks on the part of Meng Hao, gritted his teeth and fell back again. As long as he could hold off long enough for his partner to arrive, he would be saved. Only a few breaths of time would be sufficient. However, it was in this moment that Meng Hao suddenly burst into action. He took a few steps, and his energy surged dramatically. The air around him distorted, causing high donking and the female cultivator's minds to reel. Heavy injuries were instantly inflicted upon the male cultivator. He let out a blood-curdling scream as Meng Hao closed in and unleashed another fist strike onto his chest. The man's body instantly exploded into pieces. However, he wasn't dead yet. His immortal soul shot out intact and quickly made to flee. However, Meng Hao let out a harumph. The sound contained the power of his Tao divinity scripture, an intense divine sense attack that caused the man's immortal soul to tremble. In the same moment, Meng Hao's right hand made a grasping motion, and the bone-tip spear appeared, which he then hurled toward the immortal soul. Before even waiting to see the result, Meng Hao turned and let out a punch toward the shrieking female cultivator. Booms echoed out as blow landed. Blood sprayed out of the woman's mouth, and she was sent tumbling backward. The shockwave from the impact spread out and slammed into the incoming beams of sword chi from high donking, causing them to stall in midair. It was in that moment that the bone-tip spear stabbed into the forehead of the immortal soul. It trembled, and a look of disbelief appeared on its face as the soul shattered into pieces, completely destroyed. "No," screamed the woman, trembling, her eyes filling with a look of disbelief and madness. Chapter 11:12, Goodwill. The actual time it took all of these things to happen was only 10 breaths. 10 breaths of time earlier, Meng Hao had emerged from within the shield. 10 breaths of time later, one enemy was already dead. That was a true fatality, simultaneously taking on 3 people and killing one of them almost instantly. It was quick and efficient, without the slightest bit of sloppiness to it. Meng Hao had anticipated every move up to the killing blow precisely and accurately. Not only did it show how ruthless Meng Hao was, and how rapidly he took control of the situation, the fact that he had used so many divine abilities in unison left all onlookers shocked at the level of his battle prowess. Yuan Jian's eyes widened, and he took a deep breath. He had known before that Meng Hao was strong, but he had never imagined that he could actually be this strong. He asked himself if he could kill that male cultivator in only 10 breaths of time, and realized that it would have been difficult, and that was without taking into account the 2 people trying to interfere. However, Meng Hao had accomplished it all as smoothly as flowing water. Then, he spun around and attacked the female cultivator, borrowing her power to also knock aside the incoming sword chi at the same time, even utilizing it to increase his speed. "I can't believe it. He's not retreating, he's attacking." When Yuan Jian saw what was happening, his mind spun. All of a sudden, he realized that the most shocking and terrifying thing about Meng Hao wasn't his power, but rather his fighting style and domineering air. Virtually anyone else in his position would take advantage of the moment to flee, to get a bit of distance from the opponent before resuming the fight. Not so with Meng Hao. He took advantage of the situation to attack. He moved with such incredible speed that, within the blink of an eye, he was almost upon the female cultivator. The fact that he made such a choice caused Yuan Jian to inhale sharply. In the woman's moment of emotional instability, he chose to attack her to gain an advantage. However, that's also the most dangerous decision. If it were me, I would go for high donking. "Die!" The woman howled madly as Meng Hao closed in. It almost seemed as if she had lost her mind, as if the only thing she could think about was killing Meng Hao, no matter the cost. She roared as her body burst into flames, then she sacrificed her longevity, exchanging it for a momentary return to youthful vigor. She performed an incantation gesture, causing countless flower petals to swirl around her, which turned into a tempest, a sea of flowers that surged to overwhelm Meng Hao. In the moment before he was inundated, he suddenly waved his hand, causing a host of black pods to fly out. Popping sounds could be heard as they transformed into tiny imps that sped toward the female cultivator, uttering soundless screams. Clearly, they hoped to take advantage of her mental instability to possess her. The blackpot imps bored into her body, attempting to forcibly possess her. She began to tremble and then her face flickered. A miserable scream rang out and her divine ability lost stability. In the end, Meng Hao didn't even avoid it, he simply walked through the tempest of flower petals. Next, he turned into a golden rock. Golden light flashed as he closed in on the woman, then returned to human form and unleashed a fist strike. A boom could be heard as blood sprayed from the woman's mouth. She flew backward, expression twisted. The blackbot imps were all failing in their possession attempts, and yet upon failure, they would burst out of her and unleash divine sense attacks, causing the already flustered woman to descend further into madness. All of this happened in the mere time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint. Hai Donking's face fell. He couldn't simply allow Meng Hao to kill another person. If that happened, he himself would be in danger. Roaring, he performed an incantation gesture, causing 9 illusory swords to materialize around him. Subdue heaven, 9 stifling swords. In unison with his roar, the 9 swords began to emit a droning sound. Unexpectedly, in the very middle of the 9 swords, the illusory image of an old man appeared. Although his face wasn't clear, he emanated a shocking sword that exploded out, causing the 9 swords to shoot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao frowned slightly. At first, the 9 swords hadn't seemed very intimidating. However, once the illusory old man appeared among them, they changed, as if they were suddenly intelligent. In fact, their sword aura redoubled. He could probably dodge the incoming swords, but if he did, he would lose his chance to slay the female cultivator, giving her time to recover and force out the rest of the blackpot imps. If she and Hai Donking joined forces to attack together, it would be very troublesome. These thoughts flashed through Meng Hao's mind, and then a flash of determination could be seen in his eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he ignored the incoming 9 swords, transformed into a golden rock, and shot toward the woman, slashing at her with his talons. The woman screamed miserably as her flesh was flayed, causing blood to spurt out everywhere. Suddenly, her eyes grew clear, and more blackpot imps were ejected out of her. However, doing so caused more divine sense attacks to be levied against her, making her tremble and cough up more blood. Enduring the divine sense assault, the woman opened her mouth, causing a blood-colored beam of light to fly out. It immediately transformed into a blood parasol, which spread out to deflect the incoming attacks. Meng Hao didn't pause for a moment. He waved his right hand, causing a gale-force wind to spring up. A blood demon head appeared, roaring as it slashed into the blood parasol. Meng Hao in golden rock form then sped through the illusory blood demon head, clenching his right hand into a fist which he lashed out toward the woman's forehead. It was at this point that the first of the 9 swords, the fastest, pierced through the void into Meng Hao's back. After stabbing into him, it vanished, transforming into a sword will that slashed around destructively inside him. He gave a muffled grunt and his right hand trembled, giving the woman an opportunity to try to dodge. Meng Hao gave a cold snort and continued to deliver the strike, missing her forehead but connecting with her chest. Blood sprayed out of her mouth and her chest collapsed into a mass of gore. She sped back, borrowing the momentum of his blow to force out some more blackpot imps. Her eyes were now even clearer, and as she stared at Meng Hao, she waved her hand, causing a red mist to sweep out and cover her entire body. Behind Meng Hao, 3 more swords bore down. Pub pub pub. 3 swords stabbed into him, transforming into destructive sword wills. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth, and then suddenly his left eye glittered. The starstone therein then spread out explosively, causing him to transform into a planet that shot toward the red mist. A moment later, he had smashed through it and was directly in front of the woman. The female cultivator's eyes went wide, and her hands flew out, causing numerous magical items to appear. Furthermore, a suit of armor suddenly covered her. However, almost as soon as the magical items appeared, they were crushed by Meng Hao's divine abilities. Her shield shattered and her armor collapsed into pieces. She appeared to be just on the verge of dying when, all of a sudden, a pendant which hung around her neck began to emanate a soft light. Bright light covered her, which just barely took on the shape of a man, who then wrapped her up in his arms and flew backward. That man was none other than the male cultivator Meng Hao had slain moments ago. It wasn't a clone, but rather a soul fragment, branded into the pendant, which then became a life-saving magical item. It was the last memory of the man that existed for her in the whole world. Once used up, it would vanish forever. No, tears streamed down the woman's face. Although she was retreating, her heart was already broken. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the planet was blocked, incapable of killing the woman. Meng Hao appeared in his usual form, blood oozing out of the corners of his mouth. He sighed softly. I wasn't looking to kill anybody, but you people started this fight. If I didn't kill you, you would have killed me. Perhaps you two loved each other, but why did you have to come here and provoke me? He shook his head and advanced, forming his right hand into a fist. When he punched out, the illusory man who was protecting the woman began to vanish. Well, never mind. Even though we're enemies, if I don't kill you, you'll try to kill me. Considering how you feel about each other, I'll help you out a bit. With that, he stopped punching and instead waved his hand to cause divine flame to explode out. It transformed into a sea of fire, which he sent to engulf the woman and the soul fragment. The weakened woman instantly began to be burned up by the flames. Her body rapidly turned into ash, but her immortal soul didn't vanish. Instead, both of their souls were wrapped up by the divine flame, which then began to carry them up into the heavens. This divine flame will open the river to the Yellow Springs. The natural laws of the windswept realm might be incomplete, but it surely still has an underworld. He then punched upward toward the heavens, causing the sky to tremble. The divine flame ripped open the sky to reveal a huge illusory river, pitch black, within which flowed numerous sleeping souls. The souls of the man and the woman entered the black river at the same time. As they sank down into the river, the man's soul fragment turned to look at Meng Hao. There was no longer any hatred in his eyes, but instead a complicated look that eventually turned into gratitude. Then they vanished. Meng Hao turned to look behind him. He lifted his hands, and the 5 remaining incoming swords ground to a halt. They radiated killing intent, but they did not advance any further. Meng Hao's face was pale white, his cultivation base surging. Seeing Meng Hao block his swords caused Hai Donking's face to darken. Forcing down his shock, he let out an enraged shout and then shot forward. Performing an incantation gesture, he caused 1,000,000 illusory swords to combine, creating a massive, astonishing greatsword. It did not slash or swipe, but instead stabbed through the air toward Meng Hao. As the massive greatsword stabbed toward Meng Hao, he lifted his left hand up, clenched it into a fist, and unleashed the god-slaying fist, which slammed into the tip of the sword. BO1MM. Starting at the tip, the entire sword shattered. In the blink of an eye, it collapsed into millions of swords images. Blood sprayed out of Hai Donking's mouth, and a look of surprise filled his face. Too strong, he thought, heart pounding because of Meng Hao's intense power. From the beginning of the fight to this moment, the pressure in his mind had continued to build until he was shaking. The fear that filled him, that was the same type he had experienced when facing Dao Heaven. As for Meng Hao, after unleashing his god-slaying fist, he threw his head back and roared. His body began to grow, and cracking sounds could be heard as the 5 swords twisted and then exploded. At the same time, the other 4 swords which had stabbed into him were ejected out. He was as powerful as a celestial warrior. /expand. Yuan Jian was still sitting behind the shield on the mountain, and as he watched what was happening, he began to pant. By this point, Meng Hao had already made a deep impression on him. Meng Hao looked up at Hai Donking, then coolly said, "And now it's your turn." His energy erupted, and the healing of his body by his eternal stratum was plainly visible. Hai Donking's eyes went wide. He found Meng Hao's strength to be terrifying, and his heart had long since filled with towering waves of shock. He had personally witnessed Meng Hao slay his 2 compatriots, using ruthless tactics and lightning-like attacks. The whole thing caused his heart to pound. This Meng Hao is too strong, I can't handle him. Only Dao Heaven could possibly take him out. When he realized this, he immediately decided to retreat from the battle. The shadow of death seemed to fill his mind, covering every aspect of his thoughts. Without any further hesitation, and in almost the exact same moment that Meng Hao looked over at him, he turned and fled for his life. "Think you can just leave?" Meng Hao said. He began to walk forward, and his energy spiked as he unleashed the 7 god steps. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. With each step he took forward, his killing intent surged. Although he physically looked no different than before, the sky flashed with bright colors, the heavenly bodies trembled, and a huge wind kicked up. To Hai Donking, it almost felt like Meng Hao was growing larger with each step, until he was so huge he could hold up the heavens. Hai Donking's face fell as he recognized the magic. He had personally been watching on a projection screen when Meng Hao used this art to defeat Lin Kong. However, in this critical moment of the battle, Hai Donking had no time to flee very far. He quickly performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then pushed his hand down toward the ground. Immediately his body began to tremble as countless streams of sword chi erupted out of his body. 1,000,000, 5,000,000, all the way to 10 million. 10 million streams of sword chi blotted out the sky, transforming into a tempest that raged across the land toward Meng Hao. It was at this point that Meng Hao took a fourth step, a fifth step, a sixth step, a seventh step. A massive foot descended from up above, smashing down into high donking sword chi tempest. As it passed through, countless streams of sword chi were shattered and destroyed. In the blink of an eye, the 10 million streams of sword chi, incapable of standing up to the power of the foot, were crushed. The foot stamped through the air, destroying all resistance as it slammed toward high donking. His eyes went wide from the sensation of deadly crisis. He performed an incantation gesture, causing his body to wither rapidly, with the exception of his hand, which turned translucent and crystalline. Then, he waved his finger toward the foot, his expression one of ferocity and madness. "Paragon Sky, Taoist Magic Mountain," he roared. Instantly, a mountain of swords materialized in front of him, emanating shocking ripples as it slammed directly into the descending foot. The mountain of swords trembled beneath the weight of the foot. Cracks spread out, and then the mountain shattered, exploding into countless fragments. The backlash hit high donking and blood sprayed out of his mouth. He looked at the foot, eyes wide with despair. It descended, unstoppable, destructive, ripping his sword mountain apart and blotting out the sky. It was a huge shadow that descended onto him with a shocking boom. It was impossible to stop, and he was incapable of holding it up. It was as if the energy of the will of heaven were weighing down onto him, and he was nothing more than an ant. A blood-curdling scream rang out and he was stamped, crushed, his body exploding into bits of blood and gore that turned into a mist. He was completely killed. The foot faded away, and the borrowed energy and momentum Meng Hao had also dissipated. However, he didn't relax in the least. As soon as the energy faded, he transformed into a beam of light that shot toward the location where high donking had exploded. In the moment that he closed in, the mist of blood rapidly formed back together. In the blink of an eye, a power like that of time reversal could be sensed in the area, and high donking once again appeared, a look of astonishment on his face. He immediately bit his tongue and spit out a mouthful of blood, which spread out to form a blood shield. At the same time, he fell back rapidly. Terror filled his eyes, as well as an overflowing hatred. "I can't believe I just died. Damn you, Meng Hao, you forced me to waste one of my echelon lives. I refuse to accept this," he roared. Despite his posturing inside, he was shaking with fear and retreated at top speed. Rumbling filled the air as he instantly fell back by 3,000 meters. Meng Hao snorted coldly, but didn't seem surprised. After fighting with Han Qinglei and Lin Kong, he had long since come to understand how the soul of an echelon cultivator couldn't be destroyed. That was the exact reason why he had remained so on guard after killing high donking moments ago, and had even continued to advance. "You don't even deserve to be in the echelon," Meng Hao said. "I've never truly killed an echelon cultivator before, and I'm curious to find out if there will be a reward for doing so in the windswept realm." With that, he waved his right hand, causing the blood demon head to appear. As he shot through the air, wind buffeting his face, he took a deep breath, and the blood demon head slammed into the blood shield, first shattering it into pieces and then absorbing it. Meng Hao pierced over the lands like an arrow, passing through the blood demon head to appear directly behind the fleeing high donking. As he closed in, his killing intent erupted out explosively. High donking's face was ashen, and he let out a shriek as he performed a double-handed incantation gesture. His body twitched, and he opened his mouth. Shockingly, a beam of sword light shot out, which instantly transformed into 5 swords, each one a different color. The 5 swords were all illusory, but their sudden appearance on the scene caused Meng Hao's eyes widen. High donking began to chant. "Liver constitutes wood, the arrival of spring. Heart constitutes fire, the eve of summer. Spleen constitutes earth, the halfway point. Lungs constitute metal, the end of autumn. Kidneys constitute water, the dead of winter." A vicious expression could be seen on his face as he roared, performing a double-handed incantation gesture that caused the 5 sword lights to interlace and transform into a sword formation. 5 organs and 5 elements, complementary and correspondent. The ebb of day and night, no beginning and no end. Minor 5-element sword formation. He spread his hands wide, causing the 5 sword lights to spin around each other, transforming into a 5-element sword formation that rumbled toward Meng Hao. This was a heavenly sword magic of high donking, that was equal in power to his paragon magic. In fact, this was a special trump card that he had kept secret from everyone, up to this moment. Not even Dao Heaven knew that he had this technique hidden up his sleeve. In fact, the main reason he had kept it hidden was that he hoped to use it to free himself from Dao Heaven one day in the future. After all, no echelon cultivator would ever willingly become the follower of another echelon cultivator. Although he pretended not to care about the matter, he cared very much. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as the minor five-element sword formation shot through the air toward him. Then he laughed, and instead of retreating, he pushed forward faster. As he and the five-element sword formation closed in on each other, he suddenly extended his palm out ahead of him. Fifth demon sealing hex, inside-outside hex, he said coolly. The fifth demon sealing hex could break through all sorts of restrictive spells and spell formations, and as soon as he unleashed it, a rift appeared on his palm. Usually when such a rift appeared, it would consume and absorb. However, this time it was the opposite. Everything was switched, and as Meng Hao pushed his hand forward, a rumbling sound could be heard. The five-element sword formation began to tremble and was then shoved backward. It was as if some incredible, invisible power were pushing the sword formation out from the inside, causing it to expand. Meng Hao appeared in just that moment. As the sword formation was spread out thin, he passed through a gap in the middle of it, shooting forward like lightning to appear in front of Hai Donking. Hai Donking was astonished and could hardly believe what was happening. Just when he seemed to be on the verge of going mad, Meng Hao's right hand snapped out and pressed down onto the top of his head. Almost in the same moment, though, Meng Hao inexplicably shot backward, not even taking the time to perform an incantation gesture. Hai Donking threw his head back and laughed maniacally, and a rumbling sound could be heard coming from inside of him as he chose to self-detonate. Rather than allow Meng Hao to kill him, he killed himself. A huge boom could be heard as he exploded, transforming into a tempest that swept out madly in all directions. Meng Hao was shoved backward by the shockwave. However, in the same spot where he had self-detonated, a mist of blood could be seen that once again transformed into Hai Donking. This time his face was ashen. Without the slightest hesitation, he shot backward in retreat. He was trembling, and the courage he had felt when he self-detonated was now gone. That was because he knew that this was his last life. The next time he died, he would be completely destroyed in body and soul. Echelon cultivators had two lives. When he had fought Dao Heaven, there were special circumstances that led to Han Donking choosing to capitulate instead of giving up one of his lives. Were it not for that, he really would have died just now. Trembling, he went all out to flee, raising his right hand to slap down onto his chest. Blood sprayed out of his mouth and his body withered. At the same time, though, his head grew larger, giving him a bizarre and deformed appearance. Blue veins even began to pop out all over his face. "Air aperture," he roared. By sacrificing his body, he was able to enlarge his head. At the same time, an explosive influx of divine sense converged on his forehead, where it then spread out to form an invisible, enormous spell formation. It was a teleportation portal, a bit of good fortune he had obtained years ago and imprinted on his soul. He was now using divine sense to activate it and use it to escape. This spell formation was unique, and something that could only be used by an echelon cultivator who had been killed twice. Were it not for that stipulation, he would have used it much earlier. Ripples from the spell formation spread out in all directions as it prepared to whisk him away. Killing intent flickered in Meng Hao's eyes. Seeing how hard it was to actually kill Hai Donking gave him a much deeper understanding of what it meant to be in the echelon. He stepped forward and transformed into a golden rock, bursting toward Hai Donking with incredible speed. As the ripples of teleportation spread out, he snorted coldly, extended his hand, and waved a finger toward Hai Donking. Eighth Demon Sealing Hex. The eighth hex was the Cultivation Body Hex, and as soon as it was unleashed, Hai Donking's cultivation base was sealed. With his divine sense locked down, the teleportation portal instantly lost the power that was driving it. "No," Hai Donking screamed in despair. "This time you're really going to die, my first time, really and truly killing an echelon cultivator." Meng Hao's voice echoed out behind him. Chapter 11:13, Killing Hai Donking 3 times. Chapter 11:14, Thou shalt call me, Dao Fang. As Meng Hao's voice reached his ears and echoed about, Hai Qingdong felt a hand pat down onto the top of his head. Boom! Hai Qingdong's eyes went wide as the skin on his head ripped and tore. In the blink of an eye, his entire body collapsed into pieces. In that moment, all traces of Hai Qingdong existing in the world vanished. The teleportation portal winked out. Having been killed a third time in a row by Meng Hao, He was now truly and utterly dead. In the moment of his death, as the blood and gore drifted about, his echelon mark began to glow softly, and then floated toward Meng Hao. Can't believe a word that Yuan Jian says, he thought. Earlier he told me that he had killed Hai Qingdong once before. From the look of things, that was complete nonsense. That notion had occurred to him earlier when he killed Hai Qingdong for the second time. Now, he gave a cold harumph as he reached out and grabbed the echelon mark. The mark instantly fused into Meng Hao, causing an intense, stabbing pain in his forehead. Now a more complicated mark had appeared on his forehead, and if you looked closely, you couldn't tell that there were actually two symbols there. It looked complicated and ornate, as if it had undergone profound transformations. At the same time, a tremor ran through Meng Hao, and he felt something like an indescribable power flowing out of the mark on his forehead. Simultaneously, his demon-sealing hexing magic spontaneously began to flow, as the legacy of the League of Demon Sealers merged with the aura of the echelon mark. When that union occurred, Meng Hao's body shook violently, and a massive roaring like the destruction of heaven and earth filled his mind. It reached out to his soul and caused an invisible beam to fly up into the sky. Meng Hao looked up into the sky and realized that he was surrounded by a pillar of light. The light, with Meng Hao in it, shot rapidly upward, breaking through all obstacles, emerging from the windswept realm and piercing out into the heavens. Without stopping, it rose higher and higher. In the blink of an eye it had pierced through everything to appear, in the mountain and sea realm. He now hovered at an indescribable height, looking down at 9 mountains arranged together. A sun and a moon orbited around them, and there were also 9 seas. Furthermore, he was even able to see all of the living things in the 9 mountains and 9 seas. Beyond that, outside of the 9 mountains and 9 seas, seemingly attached to the realm and yet below it, were 3 land masses. One of them was the windswept realm. Meng Hao's eyes widened as he looked from the 3 lower land masses up to the 9 mountains and 9 seas. He could see planet South Heaven and his parents, standing atop the Tower of Tang. He wanted to call out in greeting, but no sound came out. He also saw his sister practicing cultivation in the Emperor Immortal sect. He saw many familiar faces in the 9th mountain and sea. He saw Fatty, Chen Fan, Wang Yaokai, and in the 9 seas god world, he saw Granny 9 and the others sitting cross-legged in meditation as they waited for the windswept realm to reopen. Feeling mentally shaken, he looked over at the 9th mountain, and on the very peak, he saw an enormous eye that suddenly turned to stare at him in confusion. He saw Qi Jiusi sitting in meditation in the ancient demon Immortal sect. He looked over at planet East Victory and saw the clone of the Fang clan patriarch. The clone originally was sitting there like a statue, but then suddenly he raised his head and peered through the void toward Meng Hao, looking slightly startled. Meng Hao began to pant as he looked over all of the 9 mountains and seas. This was not his first time experiencing such a thing. He remembered something similar happening aboard the ship in the Milky Way Sea. 1. Meng Hao's voyage through the 9 mountains and seas happened in chapter 685. For those of you who like to analyze all the details of the story, I recently updated the footnotes in that chapter with some new information. Right now, he couldn't help but think of the deep impression left upon him by the old man on that ship. As Meng Hao hovered there silently, he couldn't hold back from turning his head to look toward the 4th mountain. He began to tremble when he saw Su Qing. Obviously, she had no way of knowing that he could see her. He felt very close to her, and at the same time, oh so far away, which caused his heart to twinge with pain. She sat cross-legged in a river of stars, with Dharma protectors meditating close by. She looked exactly as she had before reincarnation, simple and cold. "Kinger," he murmured. Almost as soon as the words left his mouth, a tremor ran through Su Qing. Her eyelashes fluttered as she opened her eyes. A look of confusion could be seen in her eyes. Some of the old women sitting next to her immediately approached. "Mistress, what's wrong?" Su Qing didn't respond at first. She just stared out into the void. Finally, she said, "It was like someone was calling out to me." Her gaze eventually came to rest, in the direction of the 9th mountain and sea. As Meng Hao gazed at the 4th mountain and sea, deep inside that very mountain, a pair of eyes suddenly focused on him for a moment, then looked away. Meng Hao could sense it, shifted his gaze, and found himself looking at a huge statue. An incredible pressure emanated out from the statue, which Meng Hao found completely shocking. It was far, far more powerful than the pressure of any other person he had ever encountered. Suddenly, an archaic voice projected out from the statue. "Ah, so you're on a mental journey, Meng Hao, my young friend. There is no need to worry about Su Qing. I've accepted her as a disciple. Young friend, I wish you a safe and sound mental journey." After a moment, Meng Hao clasped hands and bowed. Then he looked deeply at Su Qing one more time, before turning his attention back to the 9 mountains and seas at large. He saw Patriarch Reliance floating through the starry sky of the 8th mountain, humming a little tune, seemingly without a care in the world. All of a sudden, a tremor ran through him. He had no hair on his body, but if he did, they would all be standing on end. "Who is it who's spying on me?" he roared. "Damn it, it feels like that little bastard Meng Hao, oh. The Patriarch has fled all the way here, and why you? You just won't give up, huh?" After looking around for a moment, he stared off blankly into the void for a while, then suddenly began to laugh heartily. "Oh," he roared complacently, "so you're way over there. Come on, you bastard scoundrel. Come get me if you can." Meng Hao snorted coldly, but then suddenly his eyes went wide. Because of the current state he was in, he suddenly saw something on Patriarch Reliance's back, in a seemingly ordinary corner of the state of Zhao. There on Patriarch Reliance's back, right in the middle of the state of Zhao, was a door. That door radiated soft light, and as soon as Meng Hao caught sight of it, his heart seized. There was something very familiar about that door, something like the aura of the ancient demon immortal sect. The legacy of Lord Li. Meng Hao's eyes widened, and his heart began to pound as he realized that apparently the legacy of Lord Li was actually on Patriarch Reliance's back. He had little time to consider the matter as he found himself rising higher up within the pillar of light, flying higher and higher up into the void above the mountain and sea realm. He brought the trembling of his heart under control as he looked up into the vault of the void, and suddenly a gleam of anticipation appeared in his eyes. He realized that all of this was most likely happening because of the echelon. Although he wasn't sure exactly what was happening, he did know exactly what the mountain and sea realm was. 33 heavens, huh? According to what I learned from the 6th generation demon sealer, breaking through the 33 heavens is the mountain and sea tribulation. His eyes glittered as he began to speed faster and faster. 2. Meng Hao reached his conclusions about the mountain and sea tribulation in chapter 1026. He wasn't sure how much time passed, but eventually he broke through some sort of barrier and found himself looking at a path. A path among the stars. There were 33 realms on that path, which seemed like 33 layers of successive seals that completely enveloped the mountain and sea realm. The beam of light took him along the path, and he pierced through one realm after another. Eventually, he broke through the 33rd realm, and it seemed like he was just on the verge of being able to see the truth about what was beyond. However, in that exact moment, a beam of golden light glittered in his eyes until that was all that he could see. Everything shattered. A tremor ran through him, and the light around him began to collapse. The stream of his soul that was in the light began to recede, but before it did, a heaven-rending, earth-crushing voice boomed out. "Thou shalt call me Dao Fang." Back in the mountain and sea realm, in the windswept realm on the national aura mountain of the 7th nation, Meng Hao trembled, let out a cry, and then coughed up a massive mouthful of blood. He staggered backward, his face pale white. The mark on his forehead flickered rapidly, then slowly faded. His demon-sealing hexing magic also faded away. What was that golden light? And that voice, Dao Fang, Dao Fang. Why does that name sound so familiar? Where did I hear it before? 3. Dao Fang was mentioned twice in the story before, in chapter 731 and chapter 887. In Chinese, it's Chinese letter Dao Fang. Dao is the same as the Dao and Fang means square. It's also the same Fang as the Fang clan. He began panting, and before he could recall anything more about the name, a brilliant beam of light rose up from the central temple of the windswept realm. It was fully 30,000 meters wide, and it shot up into the sky as if to tear open the heavens. Indescribable ripples spread out, and once again, that world of mountains and statues opened up. All eyes were fixed up above, including all of the echelon cultivators. No matter what they were doing at the moment, everyone felt their hearts pounding as they looked overhead. The entire battlefield surrounding the central temple went silent, and everyone looked in shock at the unprecedentedly bright pillar of light. In the world up above there was a mountain hidden in the mists behind all of the other mountains and statues. It was the tallest mountain in that world, and all of a sudden, that mountain crumbled into pieces and then reformed into a statue. That statue looked like a celestial warrior, shocking to the extreme. As soon as everyone saw the face of the statue, they were astonished to see Meng Hao. At the same time, a cold, archaic voice echoed out, seemingly emotionless. It filled the entire windswept realm, echoing out through the sky. Meng Hao, Echelon Cultivator from the Ninth Nation, has killed another Echelon Cultivator, a criminal act. Before the voice could finish speaking, more words echoed out, although this time they didn't seem to be completely devoid of emotion like before. Grim ripples spread out, and if you listen closely, you would be able to tell that the voice actually seemed to be different than the first one. The reward is an ancient treasure, heavenly champion, immortal axe. Chapter 11:15, Windswept Rebellion. As soon as the voice echoed out, everything shook. Expressions of shock appeared on the faces of everyone who heard the words. It must be noted that in the windswept realm, the rewards given were always related to chi flow. Never before had a magical item been bestowed as a reward. Especially not a magical item that was an ancient treasure. Ancient treasures were magical items for use in the ancient realm. Although such objects were more common than Dao realm treasures, they were still considered very rare. For example, as the crown prince of the Fang clan, Meng Hao had an ancient treasure in the form of a jade pendant, which he could use to confirm his identity. However, it was definitely a rare thing to encounter an ancient treasure. Therefore, when the words regarding a reward in the form of an ancient treasure echoed out through the windswept realm, everyone who heard it was astonished. That was especially true of the Echelon cultivators, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. After all, this entire trial by fire was focused on the Echelon, not for the purpose of them being killed, but for them to improve and develop via struggle and conflict. Of course, it wasn't impossible for one of them to accidentally be killed. However, the fact that Echelon cultivators had multiple lives revealed the truth of the matter. Paragon C. Dream did not wish for members of the Echelon to be permanently killed. Fighting was hard to avoid, of course, and naturally, deadly situations would arise. However, the reason she gave multiple lives to the Echelon cultivators was for the express purpose of ensuring that they were not conclusively slaughtered in body and soul. The Echelon cultivator from the first mountain, Dao Heaven, was aware of that, and as such, when he fought people, he didn't go all out with deadly intent. Instead, he attempted to destroy his rivals in spirit. He was well aware that Paragon C. Dream didn't approve of actually killing other Echelon cultivators. Therefore, he wouldn't attempt to do so unless it benefited him directly, or he truly detested that person. The windswept realm seems different from the descriptions of past instances in the sect records, Dao Heaven murmured. He was currently in the fourth nation, looking up into the sky. So it was Donking who died, killed by Meng Hao. This time there are actually prizes for killing Echelon cultivators. Kill one and be rewarded with an ancient treasure. I wonder what the reward would be for killing 2 or 3 or even all of them. A Dao treasure. When that final sentence came out of his mouth, he began to pant, and his eyes filled with the glow of greed. Killing intent swirling around him, he threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Things are different this time, and I love it. A murderous aura erupted out of him that had apparently been kept restrained for a very long time. Now that he could unleash it, he turned and headed off into the distance, bursting with killing intent. Other Echelon cultivators watched the scene play out with flickering expressions. Ambition rose up in their hearts, but at the same time, sensations of deadly crisis arose as well. All of them began to pant. The only exception was the middle-aged man who sat on the National Aura Mountain in the Third Nation. He smiled slightly. The time has come for things to begin. Unexpectedly, Meng Hao gained a bit of an advantage. However, he won't be able to escape the coming calamity. As the other members of the Echelon and the rest of the cultivators from the mountain and sea realm stood there in shock, something happened outside in the mountain and sea realm. In the ruins of immortality was an immortal's cave, where a white-robed woman sat cross-legged in meditation. Next to her was Li Linger, who also meditated cross-legged. All of a sudden, the white-robed woman opened her eyes, and they glowed with a murderous light. Imperial Lord of the windswept realm, how dare you? As soon as the words left her mouth, her expression flickered. In the 9 seas god worlds in the various 9 seas, massive rumbling sounds like explosions could be heard. It sounded like some massive structure was collapsing, and the sound sent massive waves surging out across the seas. The sounds echoing out through the god worlds provoked instant reactions from all of the Dao realm experts, who were currently waiting patiently for the windswept realm to reopen. What's happening this? I'm suddenly unable to sense the windswept realm. Not good. Numerous cries of alarm rose up from the various god worlds. The Nine Seas god world in the Ninth Sea was no exception. Granny Nine and the other Tao realm experts, including Godmaster and the two demonic cultivator horde patriarchs, all began to tremble. Finally, they couldn't endure any longer and blood sprayed out of their mouths. As their eyes went wide, the pillars of light stretching up into the sky shattered, and their connection to windswept realm was broken. Impossible, Godmaster's face fell. He shot to his feet and looked up into the sky. The windswept realm has been struck by some massive upheaval. Damn it, our connection to it was actually severed. Meanwhile, out in the vast darkness of the void surrounding the mountain and sea realm, the vast lands of the windswept realm trembled slightly. A sound like cracking or shattering echoed out as the previous orbit of the entire realm was suddenly changed, and it began to float up toward the 33 heavens up above. Of course, nobody in the realm itself could sense that. Paragon Sea Dream jumped to her feet, a murderous aura swirling around her. Imperial Lord of the windswept realm, are you looking to die? She waved her right hand, and her immortal's cave suddenly faded away. When it reappeared, shockingly, it was in the void of the mountain and sea realm. Then, only afterimages were left behind as it shot out of the mountain and sea realm and toward the lands of the windswept realm. The echelon cultivators in the windswept realm were all shaken. Meng Hao's face flickered as he saw a rift suddenly open up in the sky above. A black beam shot out, within which was a shocking battle axe. The battle axe emanated a boundless killing aura and was surrounded by swirling images of vengeful spirits who emanated soundless shrieks. Apparently, they were bound to the battle axe and were incapable of leaving it to enter the cycle of reincarnation. A shocking pressure erupted from the battle axe, and as it descended, the lands quaked and bright colors flashed in the sky. This was the ancient treasure, an item that would be considered of extremely high quality even among other ancient treasures. Heavenly Champion Immortal Axe. It floated down slowly to hover in front of Meng Hao, where it emanated a slight droning sound. Meng Hao's eyes went wide, and his throat went dry as he stared at the pitch-black axe. Finally, he took a deep breath, reached out and grabbed it. The instant his hand closed around the haft, an explosive power surged through him. He trembled and his hair flew up around him. He then flew up into the air, his cultivation base surging. He swung the axe, and a black beam of light shot out of it, slamming into the ground and cutting out a huge 9,000-meter-long gash. The Seventh Nation's National Aura Mountain was right in the middle of that gash, and was cut directly into two pieces. Its already weakened shield was completely incapable of standing up to such power, which clearly showed how terrifyingly powerful the axe was. Meng Hao's heart trembled as he sensed the incredible energy inside the battle axe. Yuan Jian still sat on top of the National Aura Mountain, which had just been cut into two halves. His scalp began to tingle as he stared at the two cliffs formed by the blow. He felt like his head was about to explode, and a powerful sensation of deadly crisis rose up in him. Several moments passed before the resulting windstorm died down. Meng Hao waved his hand, and the battle axe disappeared. A strange light appeared in his eyes as began to think about the circumstances in which he was rewarded with the axe. There were two voices just now, not one, he thought. The first voice was the same as the voices from before. It was cold and emotionless, presumably because it was following orders. That must be the result of the natural's laws imposed on the windswept realm by the mountain and sea realm. I killed an echelon cultivator, and according to the first voice, that was some sort of criminal act. However, a moment later a second voice spoke and actually rewarded me with a treasure. Someone encouraging us echelon cultivators to wipe each other out. Meng Hao's heart trembled. If his speculations were correct, then this turn of events surely had some connection to the way Giant Dayazi and the others had looked at them when they first arrived in mountain and sea realm, as well as the little tricks Giant Dayazi had tried to pull off. Furthermore, Meng Hao had heard the others mention that the windswept realm was different this time than it had been before. He suddenly gasped. Could it be that some great catastrophe is about to strike in the windswept realm? He thought. His face darkened. At the same time, Yuan Jian finally gained enlightenment of the 300th essence from the world seals. He then leapt to his feet and shouted at Meng Hao. Meng Hao, why you? You just about cut me in half with that axe. His voice echoed out like thunder, interrupting Meng Hao's train of thought. Meng Hao looked down at Yuan Jian and voice cool said, My hand slipped, that was all. By the way, congratulations on achieving enlightenment. Oh, another thing. Didn't you mention something about having killed Hai Donking once before? Said that? Yuan Jian responded, sounding a bit guilty. However, he instantly slipped back into a rage. Look, that's not even important. You just about chopped me in two just now. Did you hear me? It was this close. I didn't do anything to provoke you. Your hand slipped. I almost lost my life. I've cowed the entire 7th mountain, fool. I've traversed mountains of daggers and seas of flames without getting killed, then I almost get killed because your hand slipped. You owe me for this. Meng Hao wasn't really paying attention. Sea of flames, he thought. Sea of flames. I remember. Dao Fang. Beneath the ancient Dao lakes in the lands of South Heaven, the final level of the trial by fire overseen by those strange beasts was the world of the essence of divine flame. There was an eye of flame there, which yelled something that included the name Dao Fang. Meng Hao's mind trembled as he finally recalled the information he was looking for. Instantly his eyes widened, and a bright, intimidating gleam appeared in them. Of course, from Yuan Jian's perspective, he had just said a few words, only to have Meng Hao suddenly fall silent and then stare at him threateningly. He began to tremble, and he remembered how strong Meng Hao had been when he had killed the 2 cultivators moments ago. Then he had ruthlessly cut down Hai Donking. He also thought about how terrifying that axe was, and then Yuan Jian's face twitched with the realization of how impulsive it had been to berate Meng Hao the way he had. Meng Hao was clearly a jinx should never be provoked. A bead of cold sweat dripped down Yuan Jian's temple, and a wide smile broke out on his face. He quickly clasped hands and bowed several times. "Ha ha ha, brother Meng Hao, let's let bygones be bygones," he said cheerily. "I was just kidding around, brother. Even if you do chop me in two, well, no problem. I have lives left, so if you do kill me, I'll come back." Then he laughed heartily. Chapter 11:16. A Meeting in the 6th Nation. Dao Fang, he thought. Once I leave the windswept realm and get back home, I'm definitely going to go back to the ancient Dao lakes. Meng Hao's eyes glittered thoughtfully, and then the intimidating gleam in his eyes vanished. He looked back down at Yuan Jian and smiled enigmatically. How could he not have realized that Yuan Jian could have reached enlightenment much earlier and had intentionally dragged things out? Clearly, he had been planning something. Although Meng Hao's use of the axe had seemed completely spontaneous, it was actually designed as a warning for Yuan Jian. Seeing Meng Hao smile, Yuan Jian felt even guiltier. Clearing his throat, he smacked his chest heroically and said, "Brother Meng Hao, you are truly courageous and extraordinary. Ha ha ha. Dao Heaven's 3 hired thugs were all incredibly powerful, but in front of you they were like hired clowns. You crushed them like weeds. You're definitely destined to be #1 in the mountain and sea realm echelon." Although Yuan Jian's words were blatantly ingratiating, his expression was very sincere, as if every word were spoken from the depths of his heart. 1. There is some word play in this passage that doesn't quite translate well. Literally, he says, those 3 dog-legs hired thugs/henchmen of Dao Heaven were all powerful, but to you they were like dirt dogs, stray dogs, mole crickets. Well said, replied Meng Hao, chuckling. Then he stared evenly at Yuan Jian. However, fellow Taoist Yuan Jian, you still need to return the world seal I loaned to you. Yuan Jian's smile stiffened, and his mind spun with hundreds of ideas. However, when he saw the look in Meng Hao's eyes, his heart began to pound, and he once again thought about the implications of Meng Hao being rewarded for killing an echelon cultivator. Damn it, he thought. The rewards of the windswept realm this time are encouraging us to slaughter each other. I can't provoke this jinx, otherwise I'll find myself in a deadly crisis. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Yuan Jian unhesitatingly produced the world seal and sent it back to Meng Hao. Meng Hao grabbed it and put it away. Smiling just as broadly as ever, he didn't say a single word about the 7th Nation's world seal. Yuan Jian had intentionally sat out of the fight and had been plotting the whole time. Had he instead joined in to fight Hai Qingdong and the others, then Meng Hao would naturally have refrained from greedily keeping the world seal. However, since Yuan Jian had clearly been up to something, then Meng Hao didn't feel guilty at all about turning the tables on him. Yuan Jian smiled wryly. Although he was a body cultivator, the fact that he was not only a member of the echelon, but had also managed to keep his place in it for so long, and at the same time managed to reach such a high level of body cultivation, showed that he was no fool. He might not be considered a genius, he was quite adept at scheming. It was obvious to even him that Meng Hao had seen through his plan, and had used the axe as a warning. Not returning the 7th Nation's world seal was an additional punishment. Well, that's fine, he thought. Since the windswept realm seems to be encouraging us echelon cultivators to wipe each other out, then those world seals are like signal flares. The more you have, the more likely you'll be to get killed and have them stolen away. Since I have no world seal, as long as I'm careful, I'll actually be much safer. Yuan Jian was now feeling a lot more confident, so he clasped hands and bowed to Meng Hao. Backing up a few steps at the same time, he smiled and said, "Brother Meng Hao, it's getting late. My place is kind of a mess right now, so I won't keep you any longer. Take care of yourself on your way back, brother, and when you get a chance, come visit again." Meng Hao looked at him, and Yuan Jian instantly braced himself for something bad to happen. After a moment, though, Meng Hao merely smiled, swished his sleeve, and turned to depart. It was in this moment, however, that a beam of light suddenly rose up from the central temple. It was rapidly expanding, spreading out to fill the entire windswept realm. Shockingly, this light was just like the light from moments before. It was 30,000 meters wide. The massive pillar of light shot up into the heavens, causing non-stop rumbling sounds to echo out. The sky shook, and countless ripples expanded out, filling the entire sky. Meng Hao's eyes went wide, and Yuan Jian's face fell. As the beam of light burst up into the world of mountains and statues, the tallest of the mountains, the one which was now a statue of Meng Hao, suddenly blurred as a ghost image appeared next to it. The image then solidified into a second statue. That second statue depicted a young man with swirling killing intent. He emanated incredible pressure that caused Meng Hao to pant. Shockingly, that statue was holding a head in its hand. That head radiated icy coldness, despite being dead. "Tao Heaven," Yuan Jian exclaimed. "That's the echelon cultivator from the first mountain. The head in his hand is the head of the echelon cultivator from the second mountain." His face drained of blood. He well knew that Tao Heaven had long since taken the second nation's world seal from that cultivator, who had then managed to flee. He had previously reached the conclusion that lacking a world seal would place him in much less danger. He had never imagined that, after only a few breaths of time passed, his entire line of reasoning would be overturned. The echelon cultivator from the second mountain was now dead, heralding the beginning of what would no doubt be a series of bloody and chaotic battles. It didn't matter whether or not he had a world seal, he was still in incredible danger. Next, that cold and ruthless voice echoed out through the windswept realm. "The reward is an ancient treasure, lofty mountain immortal flail." All of the echelon cultivators were instantly shaken. Events were unfolding too quickly. First, Hai Qingdong was killed, and then moments later, Tao Heaven hunted down and killed someone else. Furthermore, the reward was another ancient treasure. Meng Hao stared at the world up above, and Tao Heaven's statue. His eyes then began to gleam with an intimidating light. Even though he wasn't sure how strong this Tao Heaven was compared to Hai Qingdong, from what he could sense, he was incredibly powerful. "Tao Heaven," he thought, eyes glittering. Just when he was about to leave, Yuan Jian suddenly flew up into the air and cried out, "Brother Meng Hao, ha ha ha, look, it's getting pretty late, there's no need to hurry off. Why don't you stick around for a few days?" Yuan Jian was scared, so how could he possibly allow Meng Hao to leave so easily? If Meng Hao stayed behind, then there would be two of them to fight against Tao Heaven if he came looking for them. Meng Hao ignored him and was just about to speed off into the distance when Yuan Jian, thoughts racing, clenched his teeth and then blurted, "Meng Hao, I know of a way for you to get the Sixth Nation's world seal without even lifting your pinky finger." Meng Hao stopped and looked back at Yuan Jian. Seeing that Meng Hao had stopped, Yuan Jian quickly explained, "Listen, Meng Hao, of the 9 world seals, Tao Heaven now has 3 and you have 4. The remaining 2 are those belonging to the Third Nation and the Sixth Nation respectively. The echelon cultivator in the Sixth Nation is that kid Hong Bin. We went through some dangerous situations together and became friends. How about I take you to the Sixth Nation and persuade him to give you the world seal?" 2. Hong Bin's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Hong Bin. Hong is a surname which also means great or big. Bin means refined, he declared, slapping his chest. "That way, you'll have 5 world seals, and will definitely have the upper hand. As long as you're not scared of Tao Heaven, then the Sixth Nation's world seal is yours." Meng Hao stared at him coldly. He didn't trust Yuan Jian very much. Although they hadn't known each other for long, he got the feeling that Yuan Jian was about as unreliable as Patriarch Reliance. "I don't trust you," Meng Hao said slowly. Looking insulted and a bit angry, Yuan Jian said, "Brother Meng Hao, it really hurts me to hear you say that. You know what type of person I am. I'm just like the giant Chinese letter character in my name. I'm steadfast in conduct, steadfast in word, steadfast in action, steadfast in everything." Unmoved, Meng Hao coolly responded, "You told me that you killed Hai Qingdong once." Yuan Jian didn't seem the least bit embarrassed about that fact. Laughing heartily, he said, "Brother Meng Hao, I've been wanting to reform some of my bad habits for a while now. I really managed to make myself look like a fool in front of you, brother. I'm definitely going to make some changes." "Your enlightenment earlier went way too slowly," Meng Hao said. "Ha ha ha, brother Meng Hao, there's no need to go out of your way to give me face. I wasn't slow, I was just distracted. For that, I must apologize. From now on, I definitely won't daydream anymore." Meng Hao wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. He looked closely at Yuan Jian for a moment and realized that not only were his words unreliable, but he was also extremely shameless. In terms of doing about-faces, nobody else could possibly match up to him. Yuan Jian's expression was extremely sincere. Smacking his chest, he declared, "Brother Meng Hao, this time you just have to trust me. I really am friends with Hong Bin. I saved his life once." After a moment of silence, Meng Hao looked at Yuan Jian and calmly said, "If you don't get me that world seal, then you'll see what happens when I really flip out." It was no threat. His calm words instantly caused Yuan Jian to become nervous, and he nodded. No more words were exchanged. Yuan Jian led the way, and the two of them became bright beams of light that shot through the seventh nation toward the sixth nation. They moved with incredible speed, so it wasn't long before they arrived. As soon as they entered the sixth nation, intense pressure weighed down on them, a warning of sorts. The boy Hong Bin currently sat cross-legged on the sixth nation's national aura mountain, and as soon as he sensed them, his face flickered. The national aura mountain's shield sprang up, and Hong Bin was immediately surrounded by several followers, who formed a defensive spell formation. "Damn it," he said out loud. "Is it Dao Heaven, or is it just someone passing through? Either way, keep the spell formation ready. If it's Dao Heaven, we can teleport out of here." Hong Bin was extremely nervous. Currently, the two people he feared most were Dao Heaven and Meng Hao. Both of them had killed other echelon cultivators and had been rewarded with ancient treasures. How could he not be afraid? He didn't want his own life to be the price paid to get either one of them another ancient treasure. As he sat there vigilantly, two streaks of light pierced through the air outside of the National Aura Mountain. Yuan Jian was in the lead position, and as soon as he got close enough, he urgently shouted, "Hong Bin, old pal, it's Yuan Jian, come to pay respects." Almost as soon as the words left his mouth, Hong Bin caught sight of Yuan Jian. Instantly, his eyes blazed with anger, and he shot to his feet. "Damn it, Yuan Jian, you duplicitous bastard. You calmed me back then and I never hunted you down about it, but now you have the gall to come looking for me. Hey, who's that behind you? That's... Damn it, I can't believe you brought him here. I won't rest until you're dead, Yuan Jian." As soon as Hong Bin's shrill voice echoed out, Yuan Jian glanced embarrassedly over at Meng Hao. What he saw was Meng Hao looking back at him with an icy smile. "Brother Meng Hao," he gushed, "just give me the time it takes half an incense stick to burn. Don't worry, I'll definitely succeed." In a flash, he sped toward the National Aura Mountain. Chapter 11:17, He's Here. On the Sixth Nation's National Aura Mountain, the boy Hong Bin sat grim-faced, surrounded by 9 followers. His teleportation portal was ready to be used at a moment's notice. All it required was a bit of divine will, and then he would be teleported away. He held the world seal of the Sixth Nation tightly in his hand as he stared coldly at Yuan Jian. However, he did not teleport away. Yuan Jian hurried over until he was right outside the National Aura Mountain shield. Of course, without Hong Bin's permission to enter, all he could do was hover outside and smile wryly. "Brother Hong Bin, listen. Beat it, whoever you call brother gets struck with bad luck." Hong Bin had a very unsightly look on his face. He glanced over at Meng Hao off in the distance, eyes wide. Originally, he hadn't thought much at all about this latest addition to the echelon. However, Meng Hao's display of power in the windswept realm completely swept away any cavalier attitudes toward him harbored by the other echelon cultivators. He had defeated Han Qinglei, routed Lin Kong, and had then gone on to slaughter another echelon cultivator. Such achievements in battle ensured that he rose to prominence like a blazing sun, and was a person that no one would take lightly. Hong Bin gritted his teeth and said, "I'll let you say 3 more things, and after that you'd better get the hell back to wherever you came from, otherwise I'm out of here." "Out of here? To where?" Yuan Jian shouted, looking righteously at Hong Bin. "It's not like you can leave the windswept realm. No matter where you run to, if Dao Heaven thinks it's worth it to track you down, do you really think he'll let you get away?" Hong Bin grimaced. He was also aware that fleeing was not a good long-term option. However, there was really no other choice. Dao Heaven was simply too powerful. You can say two more things, Hong Bin said, his face grim. You're powerless to defend yourself, Yuan Giant continued, and so am I, all because of this damned windswept realm and the changes to the rules. Don't try to convince me that you haven't noticed the writing on the wall. Furthermore, don't try to get me to believe that you don't know why I brought Meng Hao here. Cooperation could be doubly beneficial for all of us, whereas splitting up would be doubly detrimental. You can say one more thing, Hong Bin said slowly, placing his right hand on the ground, which caused the teleportation portal to rev up. All the while, he stared at Yuan Giant. Fudge, I didn't have three things to say, fool, Yuan Giant roared. If you want to chicken out, then get the hell out of here. Hong Bin stared in shock, and his expression grew even more unsightly. He shifted his gaze over to Meng Hao off in the distance, then gritted his teeth after a long moment. Can he beat Dao Heaven? Maybe, maybe not, Yuan Giant said bitterly. Even if you join the two of us, we still might not be able to beat him. But this is the only way we'll even have a chance. The alternative is just waiting for Dao Heaven to slaughter us all one by one. Hong Bin replied with silence. If Yuan Giant had said that he was sure they could beat Dao Heaven, Hong Bin would have teleported away immediately. Generally speaking, he didn't trust anything Yuan Giant said. However, for Yuan Giant to unexpectedly respond in this way caused Hong Bin to hesitate. What does he want in exchange for my help? Hong Bin asked, looking at Yuan Giant. Yuan Giant looked back silently at Hong Bin for a moment before replying. Do you really need to ask? After another moment, he continued. Fellow Taoist Hong Bin, I might have conned you in the past, but you have to admit that when I didn't hurt you in any way. Hong Bin clenched his jaw, then waved his right hand. The Sixth Nation's world seal flew out, piercing through the shield and flying past Yuan Giant toward Meng Hao. If he was going to purchase a favor, it would be better to have Meng Hao owe him than Yuan Giant. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he reached out toward the incoming world seal. Fellow Taoist Meng Hao, Hong Bin said, one word at a time. I'm not sure what this shyster Yuan Giant told you, but since this is our first time meeting, I want to make something clear. Dao Heaven has started killing people, and I don't want to end up a victim. Neither does Yuan Giant. As for you, if you want to fight Dao Heaven, you'll need our help. At the very least, you'll need us up until Dao Heaven is dead. Meng Hao caught the world seal. After a moment of silence, he nodded. You're right, he said slowly. So, are you guys ready? Such a response from Meng Hao caught Hong Bin off guard. He had assumed Meng Hao would make some sort of confident declaration, but instead, he had responded complete contrary to expectation. Yuan Jian's eyes also went wide. He and Hong Bin looked at each other, and then expressions of determination filled their faces. Fellow Taoist Meng, you're very frank and straightforward, said Hong Bin. I don't need to prepare anything. I'm ready to fight right now. With that, he rose to his feet, his cultivation base surging. His energy soared, and a massive wind sprang up into the sky. Yuan Jian's eyes gleamed with resolve, and his cultivation base also erupted with power. A second tempest roared up into the sky, joining with Hong Bin's to shake everything. The shocking power caused the lands to tremble and the air to distort. They were like two burning torches in the dead of night, making a declaration to every other echelon cultivator, even to Dao Heaven, that they wanted to fight. Meng Hao took a deep breath. He put away the Sixth Nation's world seal and then also unleashed his power. Massive rumbling could be heard as his energy quickly surpassed Yuan Jian and Hong Bin's, causing everything to shake violently. These were three echelon cultivators, simultaneously powering up, creating a will to fight that shook everything, issuing a direct challenge to Dao Heaven. This was no plot, scheme, or trick. This was an open and above-board declaration of war. The mortals in the windswept realm didn't notice anything more than a sudden increase in the air pressure. However, the cultivators could detect the shocking transformations, the trembling of the lands and the chaos up in the sky. As for the raging will to fight cast off by Meng Hao, Yuan Jian and Hong Bin, only other echelon cultivators could detect it. Han Qinglei and Lin Kong were no longer in their original nations. Both were hiding in random places in the windswept realm. In one particular mountain cave, Han Qinglei suddenly looked in the direction of the Sixth Nation, and his face flickered. Lin Kong was sitting cross-legged at the bottom of a lake. When the lake water began to vibrate, he suddenly looked up and his eyes flashed. In the Fourth Nation, Dao Heaven was flying at top speed through the air when all of a sudden, he stopped in mid-flight and looked in the direction of the Sixth Nation. A bright gleam appeared in his eyes, and a faint smile turned up the corners of his mouth. He could sense the will to fight in those 3 bursts of energy, and could tell that they were issuing a challenge to him. "You want to fight? Well then, let's fight," he said proudly. Then he exploded with massive speed, transforming into a blue dragon that roared off into the distance. The roaring shook heaven and earth, causing a massive wind to kick up and the sky to move backward. When compared to the energy of Meng Hao and the others, his energy was actually slightly greater. At the same time, he pushed himself with greater speed, piercing through the air and leaving behind only afterimages as he shot toward the Sixth Nation with indescribable speed. Outside of the Sixth Nation's national aura mountain, almost as soon as Meng Hao and the others unleashed their energy, they felt the response from Dao Heaven. Yuan Giant's face darkened. Damn it, he's even stronger than before. Meng Hao's eyes went wide. He had never met Dao Heaven from the first mountain, but had heard his name mentioned by other echelon cultivators. He knew that Dao Heaven was strong, and that, 30 years ago, he had earned the title of #1 in the echelon. In the subsequent 30 years, other echelon cultivators would have had the chance to catch up, putting them in the position to fight him. From the way things were playing out in the windswept realm, though, it seemed that Dao Heaven was still the #1 most powerful member. Meng Hao took a deep breath, and his eyes flickered with the intense desire to fight. Inside the National Aura Mountain shield, Hong Bin felt his heart beginning to pound, and he started grumbling inwardly. Now that Dao Heaven had revealed his energy, the bravery he had felt moments ago was waning. After a moment, though, his eyes flickered and he said, "I'm adept with Taoist magic. I'll stay here behind the shield where I'm safe and use magical techniques on Dao Heaven. That is how I can support you, elder brother Meng and elder brother Yuan." Yuan Giant hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth. Determination shone in his eyes, and it looked like he was ready to throw caution to the wind. "I'm a body cultivator and I have my 6x9 god body," he said. "Brother Meng Hao, you might be the most powerful fighter among us, but you've never tangled with Dao Heaven. Let me take the lead in the battle. I'll buy you some time to analyze him." Yuan Jian's sudden statement caused Hong Bin to stare in shock. Yuan Jian was the type of person who seemed honest, but was actually very treacherous, so Hong Bin would never have guessed that he would choose to do as he just had. Meng Hao also looked at Yuan Jian with a strange expression. After a moment of thought, he nodded. "Very well, it will help to have some time to study him." The 3 of them spoke no more words. They sat down cross-legged, Yuan Jian and Meng Hao in midair outside of the shield, Hong Bin inside. All 3 remained in their peak states as they waited for Dao Heaven's arrival. Eventually, Yuan Jian took out a bottle of medicinal pills and quietly consumed one. Rumbling sounds emanated out from inside of him, and he began to shine with a red glow. "God blood?" Meng Hao asked suddenly. "My last drop," Yuan Jian replied, crushing the bottle to show that it really was the last drop inside. "How did you get it?" Meng Hao asked. "By killing a god," was the cool response. "Brother Meng Hao, if you're interested, then as long as I don't die in this fight, I'll take you to the 7th mountain one day. We can take a trip to the god domain and slay some gods." Meng Hao nodded. "Deal." Time passed. Soon, Dao Heaven was shooting over the sky of the 5th Nation, causing rumbling sounds to emanate out. The ground quaked and rifts tore open in the sky. All of a sudden, a crimson chain appeared, wrapped around Dao Heaven's arm, which emanated the aura of an ancient treasure. That was none other than his reward for killing the echelon cultivator from the 2nd mountain, Lofty Mountain Immortal Flail. Gradually, what appeared to be images of lofty mountains appeared on the surface of the chain. Occasionally, even immortal mountains could be seen. Dao Heaven shot through the 5th Nation, face both icy and also filled with pride and self-confidence. Eventually, he reached the 6th Nation. As soon as he passed over the border, incredible pressure weighed down on him. Back on the 6th Nation's National Aura Mountain, Hong Bin suddenly said, "He's here." Yuan Jian's eyes began to shine, and he rose to his feet, looking more serious than ever. Meng Hao took a deep breath and looked off into the distance. In that direction, he sensed a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering power of qi and blood, rumbling in his direction. Chapter 11:18, Fighting Dao Heaven. Dao Heaven had arrived. The sky churned and the land shook. It was as if the king of all the heavens had arrived. As soon as he set foot onto the lands below, a seemingly invincible energy radiated out with each step he took. Every step caused the land to quake, and huge footprints to appear in the ground. It was as if an invisible giant were treading forth. Dao Heaven wore a long white robe and had flowing black hair. He was handsome, seemingly having cast off all traces of mortality. His eyes shone like stars, and anyone who looked into them would feel as if they were being sucked into their depths. 30 years ago, he had been named the #1 cultivator in the echelon, its most powerful member. He did not wear a crown, and yet anyone who looked at him would find him kingly. He wore no imperial robes, only a white garment, and yet he appeared to represent the heavens. He strolled along, seemingly in no hurry, and yet filled with icy coldness. The way he looked down at Meng Hao and the others made it seem as if they were ants to him. Apparently, it was only Meng Hao himself whom he seemed to find even the least bit interesting. "So the three of you want to challenge me to a fight," he said coldly as he hovered in midair. His simple statement echoed out like thunder, tearing through all obstacles to pound into the ears of Meng Hao, Yuan Jian, and Hong Bin. Yuan Jian's face went pale and he trembled as he took a few steps backward. Then he threw his head back and howled, "Dao Heaven!" Roaring, he suddenly shot up into the air. Hong Bin sat behind the shield, blood oozing out of the corners of his mouth, a look of astonishment and fear written on his face. He had never imagined that a single statement uttered by Dao Heaven could injure him so badly. It was almost as if the shield behind which he sat was useless. Seeing that Yuan Jian was going on the offensive, Hong Bing gritted his teeth and performed an incantation gesture. Then he waved his finger toward Dao Heaven, causing numerous stars to materialize up above. The stars flickered and then smashed toward Dao Heaven. In addition, multitudinous complex lines spread out around Dao Heaven, forming spinning spell formations that seemed designed to entangle and kill him. Meng Hao took a deep breath. Although Dao Heaven's words didn't affect him very much, now that he was face to face with the young man, he could sense an incredible might emanating off of him. That might was the incredible battle prowess of Dao Heaven's shocking cultivation base. "Of all the people I've encountered in my generation, he's definitely the strongest," he thought, his eyes flickering. He stepped forward, unleashing the 7 God steps, which caused his energy to begin to rise up. It takes a bit of time to describe all of these things, but they all happened in almost an instant. Dao Heaven smiled indifferently, as if he didn't even care about his 3 opponents. "None of you even deserve to be in the echelon," he said, waving his right hand through the air. Instantly, the air seemed to rip apart and then spin toward the incoming stars. Before the stars could even get close to Dao Heaven, they were shattered into pieces. Next, Dao Heaven raised his right foot up and stamped it down. A boom echoed out, followed by a shockwave that spread out with astonishing attack power. As soon as it touched the spell formations, cracking sounds could be heard, and the delicate spell formations were destroyed. After taking that single step, Dao Heaven pushed his right finger toward the incoming Yuan Jian. Yuan Jian threw his head back and roared, 6 times 9 God body, 9th transformation. Rumbling sounds could be heard as his body rapidly grew larger, until he looked like a giant. Incredible power radiated off of him as he sent 2 fists flying toward Dao Heaven. In the blink of an eye, his fists connected with Dao Heaven's finger. In that instant, the flesh was shredded off of his hands, revealing the bones underneath. Yuan Jian let out a miserable shriek as he tumbled backward, blood spraying everywhere. Shockingly, his 2 fists couldn't stand up to the swipe of Dao Heaven's single finger. Meng Hao was shaken inwardly. He had fought Yuan Jian and knew that in his current state, even he would be incapable of seriously injuring Yuan Jian with a single finger swipe. "Impossible," Yuan Jian howled. "Why you? How many times have you dropped your cultivation base back down from the ancient realm?" It was a huge blow to him to have been seriously injured by a single finger swipe. Insects like you shouldn't talk about things they don't understand. 1. Dao Heaven uses a variation on a Chinese idiom which basically means that summer insects cannot discuss ice, meaning that it is impossible to speak to people of limited experience. Dao Heaven said coolly, taking another step forward, instantly bypassing Meng Hao. It was almost like a teleportation, which placed him very close to the 6th Nation's national Aura Mountain shield. "Yuan Jian," Dao Heaven said loftily, "you don't deserve to be in the echelon, and you, Hong Bin, you deserve it even less." He waved his finger toward the shield, causing a sun and a moon to appear. They swirled around each other as they sped through the air and then smashed into the shield. A vicious expression appeared on Hong Bin's face. He performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing numerous streams of light to explode up. 10 million of them spread out, creating a bright river that surged toward Dao Heaven. Dao Heaven's expression was as lofty as ever as his finger touched the shield. A boom rang out, and the shield trembled, distorting even more violently than before. Instantly, cracks spread out from the point where his finger had touched it. "Break," he said. The cracks expanded rapidly, and in the blink of an eye the entire shield suddenly shattered. At the same time, Hong Bin's river of 10 million streams of light rumbled toward Dao Heaven with shocking power. At the same time, Hong Bin's face went pale, and an expression of fear appeared. Without any further hesitation, he slapped his hand onto the ground, causing the teleportation portal to surge into motion. Blood sprayed out of the mouths of his 9 followers as they used their life force to power the portal. "That's all you've got?" Dao Heaven asked calmly, not even looking at the incoming river of light. As it neared, he shot forward through the river, appearing directly on the Sixth Nation's national aura mountain. Just when Hong Bin was about to teleport away, Dao Heaven lifted his right foot up and stomped down onto the mountain. A massive energy erupted out from him, causing the entire national aura mountain to shatter and collapse. Countless rocks and rubble tumbled out in every direction, and Hong Bin's 9 followers exploded into bits. The teleportation portal was also shattered, and Hong Bin was sent flying back, blood spraying out of his mouth, an expression of shock and terror on his face. "Save me," he screamed. He was in the echelon and was a proud person, but in this moment of critical danger he abandoned all pride and fled. Yuan Giant let out a bellow of rage and attacked again. Meng Hao also fell back. The level of power on display by Dao Heaven had already struck him deeply. He had fought many people of his generation with cultivation bases similar to himself, but none of them could even compare to Dao Heaven. "So is this the real echelon?" he thought, feeling shaken. After having defeated Han Qinglei, Lin Kong, and then Hai Dongqing, he had started to look down on the echelon. As of this moment, all such feelings vanished. "Nobody can save you now," Dao Heaven said casually, then laughed and transformed into a blur that shot over to Hong Bin. He raised his right hand and pointed a finger toward Hong Bin's forehead. The speed was so incredible that, before Hong Bin could even do anything, the finger was about to tap onto his head. It was at this point that, all of a sudden, the lightning cauldron appeared in Meng Hao's hand. Electricity danced around him, and then he vanished. When he reappeared, shockingly, he was directly in front of Hong Bin. As for Dao Heaven, he was now in the position that Meng Hao had just occupied. Despite how powerful he was, he gaped in shock. In that moment of shock, Meng Hao's voice echoed out, filled with killing intent. "Paragon magic, Paragon bridge." He waved his hand, causing his cultivation base to surge with power. 123 immortal meridians and 33 heavens formed into the Paragon bridge, which smashed down toward the astonished Dao Heaven. As for Hong Bin, there was really nowhere for him to flee to. He had just been snatched out of the jaws of death, and now he hesitated no longer. He performed an incantation gesture, causing his forehead to split open and 2 fish to fly out. One of the fish was black and the other was white. They spun in a circle, head to tail, creating a circle in midair. Black and white light shone out as they spun, gradually forming into a spell array. Shockingly, this spell array was Hong Bin's Paragon magic. Paragon magic, Tao of Yin and Yang. Yuan Jian threw his head back and roared, and brilliant red light surged up from him. By now, he had fully absorbed the drop of god blood that he had consumed earlier. Now, he could unleash his own Paragon magic. Paragon magic, God extermination tattoo. Yuan Jian waved his hand, causing half of his clothing to transform into nothing but ash. Shockingly, blood swirled on both his chest and back to form a tattoo of blood. The tattoo depicted numerous gigantic gods being massacred in one scene after another. A murderous aura exploded off of Yuan Jian, and astonishingly, the area around him seemed to transform into the scenes from the tattoo. The sky turned the color of blood, and a multitude of shocking illusory figures could be seen everywhere. All in one moment, Meng Hao, Yuan Jian, and Hong Bin all unleashed their Paragon magic. Dao Heaven's face flickered, and he suddenly lifted his right hand up and smacked it down onto his chest. Immediately, the sound of a thumping heart began to echo out. Ba-dump, ba-dump, ba-dump. 9 heartbeats boomed out like thunder, shaking the world. Furthermore, with each heartbeat, Dao Heaven's energy shot higher and higher until he was emanating an aura of the ancient realm. After 9 heartbeats, his power was almost indescribable. This was the aura of 9 breakthroughs into the ancient realm, turning him into a fiendish divinity. When he threw his head back and roared, strange colors flashed in the sky. I have stepped into the ancient realm 9 times before. 9 times, I forced myself back down to recultivate and break through again. Do you really think that weaklings like yourself could compare to me? You're dead, all of you. Dao Heaven's voice echoed with shocking pressure, weighing down heavily onto Meng Hao and the others. Meng Hao's eyes glittered and he immediately said, "You stepped into the ancient realm 9 times but then forced yourself back down and started over. That means you made 9 mistakes, picked 9 wrong paths. If your path was correct, the one time would be enough." Then he sent his paragon magic rumbling out. /expand. Dao Heaven faced off haughtily against the paragon magics of Meng Hao and the others. Suddenly, he took a breath, and his energy surged as he stretched his right hand up and waved it around. As for my paragon magic, I have come to call it paragon painting. Even as the words left his mouth, the air in front of Dao Heaven distorted and was ripped apart as a scroll painting flew out. The scroll painting was pitch black and emanated a boundlessly ancient feeling. It seemed like something that had existed for countless years, and before it even opened, it emanated an incredible, murderous aura. The power of that aura instantly caused bizarre colors to flash everywhere, and the wind to churn. It was impossible to even describe the level of power. This type of murderous aura was something that Meng Hao hadn't encountered in his entire life. It seemed like an aura of someone who had ended countless lives, who had exterminated worlds upon worlds, who had proven his paragon status by means of endless slaughter. The air rumbled and distorted beneath the power of this aura of murder. The sky turned dark, as if it were being completely covered up, as if the whole world were turning black. The ground quaked, and the murderous aura caused fog to spring up and roil out in all directions. In a brief moment, the entire world changed. Meng Hao's heart was pounding, and it was the same with Yuan Jian and Hong Bin, whose faces had fallen. It was as if within this scroll painting hid a shocking, fiendish beast, whose mere aura could suck away all the light of the world. "Paragon painting open," Dao Heaven said proudly, performing an incantation gesture and pointing at the scroll painting. Noiselessly, the scroll painting began to open up, not fully, only about 30%. However, the 30% that was revealed gave a glimpse of the scene depicted. It was a bizarre world, a world of pitch black, and if you looked closely you would see a land that seemed to embody death. Nothing else was visible except for that land, nor would it be, unless the scroll painting was opened further. However, that tiny portion caused an indescribable power to surge out, which spread out in all directions along with the murderous aura. Heaven and earth seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The world seemed about to fall apart. Massive power rumbled out, sweeping toward Yuan Jian and completely shattering his paragon magic. When the blood-colored images of Yuan Jian's paragon magic collapsed, he was flung backward, blood spraying out of his mouth. Meng Hao felt as if a mountain had slammed into him. His body trembled and blood oozed out of his mouth. He staggered backward 30 meters, and as he looked at Dao Heaven's terrifying paragon magic, he realized that it was something he couldn't even fight. Just what is painted inside of that scroll, he thought, heart trembling. The worst off of the group was the boyish Hong Bin. He screamed and then coughed up a mouthful of blood as he shot backward. Before he could get very far, a blur sped through the air, which was none other than Dao Heaven. His face was pale. Apparently, the paragon magics unleashed by Meng Hao and the others were not things that he could simply ignore, as he had their previous attacks. They had forced him to the point of using paragon magic to fight back. If any of his followers were present, they would surely be astonished by this. Dao Heaven's pride was such that he had never actually unleashed his paragon magic during battle with members of his generation. In fact, he would only use it to suppress powerful experts of the senior generation. But now, Meng Hao and the others had forced him to use it. Facing their combined attack had actually filled Dao Heaven's heart with a sense of deadly crisis. However, that sense of crisis led to the unleashing of his paragon magic, which instantly turned the tide of battle in his favor. He suddenly appeared directly in front of Hong Bin, his eyes flashing with killing intent as he waved his hand in an attack. The simple wave of a hand unleashed explosive power, transforming into a will of slaughter that slammed into Hong Bin. Seeing that he was about to be overwhelmed, a crazed look appeared in Hong Bin's eyes. He threw his head back and roared, choosing to self-detonate in the same moment that Dao Heaven went in for the kill. His eyes were bright red as his cultivation base exploded with mad power. As Hong Bin's body detonated, Dao Heaven's pupils constricted. He flicked his sleeve, using his robe to defend himself. Hong Bin exploded, his body transforming into a tempest that swept out in all directions. The massive blast shattered the sky and crushed the land. Dao Heaven's will of slaughter was bashed away by the force of the explosion, and Dao Heaven's face went pale. He was slightly injured by the impact, and yet he didn't cough up any blood. Hong Bin took advantage of the moment to reform from the haze of blood. When he reappeared, he shot backward at top speed. "Save me," he screamed. He had died once before during his time in the Sixth Mountain, and if you coupled that with the self-detonation just now, it meant that he could no longer rely on being able to come back. The next time he died, he would die for good. In the same moment that Hong Bin cried for help, Meng Hao and Yuan Jian went on the offensive. Meng Hao unleashed the essence of divine flame, and Yuan Jian roared as red light swirled around him. His fist shot out, causing a figure of blood to appear, a towering giant who pounced toward Dao Heaven. Dao Heaven snorted coldly as Yuan Jian's blood-colored giant closed in. He performed an incantation gesture with his left hand and pointed out. Suddenly, the immortal flail on his arm vanished, then snapped out from his finger, slamming into the blood-colored giant. A huge boom echoed out as the giant exploded. As for the immortal flail, it didn't stop, but rather continued straight on toward Yuan Jian. The person Dao Heaven was actually the most concerned about was Meng Hao, whose divine flame was currently bearing down on him. "Essence, I have that too," he suddenly said. He spit something out of his mouth and the flash of lightning could be seen. It was a red lightning bolt that seemed to summon lightning from heaven and earth. Countless lightning bolts began to fall, transforming into a sea of lightning that shot toward Meng Hao's essence of divine flame. When the two forces slammed into each other, the flame essence and the lightning essence both collapsed with a massive boom. All of this takes a long time to describe, but the truth of the matter is that in the same moment that Dao Heaven blocked Meng Hao and Yuan Jian, he didn't pause for even a moment before chasing after Hong Bin. "Die," he said, his voice cool. His right hand clenched into a fist and he punched out. That blow contained an indescribably wild wind, an explosive tempest that bore down onto Hong Bin. The light of despair flashed in Hong Bin's eyes, and he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing numerous spell formations to appear in front of him. He also waved his hand, sending various magical items flying out of his bag of holding. He even used life-saving magical items. He didn't spare a single thing in his defense. However, all of his spell formations and magical items were crushed by Dao Heaven as easily as if they were dried weeds. Everything collapsed, and just as the tempest was about to slam into Hong Bin, Dao Heaven suddenly transformed the fist into a claw, which latched onto Hong Bin's forehead. Dao Heaven then coldly spoke out 3 words, "Heavenly Demon Devouring." Hong Bin immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. His fleshly body rapidly withered away as his life force was absorbed by Dao Heaven. Instantly, all of Dao Heaven's injuries were healed. Blood sprayed out of Hong Bin's mouth, and as death neared him, a spell formation suddenly appeared on his forehead. The spell formation then exploded, shoving Dao Heaven's hand away. Hong Bin was transformed into nothing but ash, with only his immortal soul left behind. He let out a piercing cry, and a look of madness could be seen on his face. "Yuan Jian, Meng Hao, it would be better for you to get the reward for killing me than to let me fall by Dao Heaven's hand. Swear to me that you'll avenge me by cutting him down." Hong Bin feared death, but he was still a member of the echelon. Echelon cultivators were proud, and when faced with death, they rarely acted indecisively. Without the slightest hesitation, he shot toward Yuan Jian. Yuan Jian's heart trembled, as did Meng Hao's. They had all miscalculated. Dao Heaven was so strong that even the 3 of them together weren't strong enough to take him down. "The only person who will be killing you is me," Dao Heaven said with a cold laugh. His right hand made a clawing motion toward Meng Hao and Yuan Jian. Instantly, rumbling echoed out as the air between them was shattered, transforming into an obstacle-like distortion that separated them completely. Then Dao Heaven shot like lightning toward Hong Bin, his eyes shining with anticipation. "I wonder what reward I'll get for killing you, Hong Bin. Prepare to die." Dao Heaven raised his hand and grabbed out toward Hong Bin, upon whose face appeared a look of despair. Hong Bin was incapable of fleeing and couldn't even self-detonate. It was as if his body was completely sealed off. Just when he was on the verge of being killed, Meng Hao suddenly pulled out the lightning cauldron. Electricity danced, but at the same time, Dao Heaven let out a roar. Suddenly, a red glow spread out, covering both him and Hong Bin. Unexpectedly, Meng Hao's lightning cauldron didn't work. That didn't cause Meng Hao to pause for even a moment, however. He raised his left hand and waved a finger toward Dao Heaven. The 8th demon sealing hex was unleashed. Dao Heaven could be on guard against Meng Hao's lightning cauldron, but could do nothing to stop the eighth demon sealing hex. As soon as the hexing magic was unleashed, Dao Heaven suddenly lurched to a stop. For the second time his face fell, and a feeling of astonishment rose up inside of him. He was only locked down for the space of about one breath of time. However, to Hong Bin, that one breath of time was enough for him to escape the shackles of being sealed. However, he didn't take advantage of that moment to flee. He knew that getting away was an impossibility. Laughing bitterly and eyes shining with determination, he flew directly toward Dao Heaven in an attack. "Get revenge for me," he said, throwing his head back and roaring. Yuan Jian urgently cried out, "Hong Bin." Meng Hao's heart trembled. It was at this point that Hong Bin's immortal soul closed in on Dao Heaven. At the same time, Dao Heaven was beginning to recover from the eighth demon sealing hex. A vicious smile appeared on the face of Hong Bin's immortal soul as he self-detonated. BOM. Detonation of an immortal soul alone would not unleash the same power as if the fleshly body exploded along with it. However, Hong Bin was in the echelon, and as such, the detonation of his immortal soul transformed into a power far beyond the ordinary. More importantly, the damage was increased because of his close proximity to Dao Heaven, who was incapable of putting up a solid defense because he still hadn't fully recovered from Meng Hao's magical technique. A huge, shocking boom echoed out as Hong Bin's immortal soul exploded into nothing more than ash. Dao Heaven was shaken and tumbled backward, coughing up blood. This was the first time during the fight that he coughed up blood, which splashed down onto the ground and formed a lake of blood. "Meng Hao," Dao Heaven roared, screeching to a halt in midair. His face was pale as he turned to look at Meng Hao, a murderous gleam in his eyes. The 2 moments of danger he had experienced so far had both been because of Meng Hao. This time, because Hong Bin had died by means of self-detonation, Dao Heaven got no reward for killing him. Chapter 11:19. Hong Bin dies in battle.